Welcome back, everyone. This is Dave from Korman Productions with my co-host Stacie here to talk about the original Quantum Leap, Season 1, Episode 1, Genesis. The episode's description reads as follows. Although the Project Quantum Leap isn't ready yet, Sam Beckett doesn't listen to supercomputer Ziggy, hops into the accelerator, and leaps. As Tom Stratton, an Air Force test pilot about to attempt a dangerous flight, Sam finds his memory Swiss cheese with only enough left to know that he is not where or when he belongs. According to Sam's friend and partner Al, who appears to him as a hologram nobody else can see, Al explains that the project has gone awry, and in order to leap out of the pilot's body, Sam must successfully fly the X-2 to Mach 3, which according to historical records, ended in a fatal crash. The episode was written by Donald P. Belzero. He gets sole writing credit on that. And the episode was directed by David Hemmings, who also directed The Leap Between the States in Season 5. He directed no other episodes during the course of this series. The episode takes place on September 13th, 1956, and originally aired on March 26th, 1989, which, hey, guess what, guys, is today.
35 years ago, exactly.
To this day.
Which is why we chose today to revisit Genesis. It's something we've been talking about doing because we haven't actually covered this episode together, like in official capacity through the podcast. Even though Dave, you have talked about it before on your YouTube channel.
Yes, I did. There was the very first Quantum Leap episode I ever talked about, which makes sense because this is the very first episode of the series.
So we're revisiting that today, and unlike when you covered it the first time, we're going to be covering parts 1 and 2 of Genesis all together in this video.
Right, because 3-hour podcast no longer scary.
No longer scary, so it might be a long one.
Yep, it might be.
Yeah, but if you are watching this on the YouTube version, there's going to be a special surprise for you during the intermission between parts 1 and 2.
Yes, so stay tuned for that.
We are going to be celebrating 35 years of Quantum Leap. We have some amazing special guests, so make sure you check that out.
Absolutely.
And if you're listening on one of the podcast platforms, you're going to have to head over to YouTube to see that.
All right. So a couple of things before I go on. One, this is not a Sport Brief podcast. If you haven't watched the episode, I highly recommend you check it out and then come back and give us a listen. Secondly, if you're listening on one of the platforms that this podcast is now available on, please follow and feel free to check out my YouTube channel, Korman Productions, where additional content can be discovered, both Quantum Leap related and otherwise. If you're already on my YouTube channel, please like, share, and comment, as well as subscribing to our channel. All right, the one and only shout out I have for this week is, actually, I will also shout out Deborah Pratt because she is one of our special guests. I'm going to spoil that now. just so you know what you're waiting for. Deborah Pratt sent us a little video message, and we're going to talk about that later. And of course, you're going to see it. Also, Minnie Gallup. She couldn't wait for us to talk about this episode. The wait is finally over. Here we are.
Here we are.
And she had a theory about the watch from the leap back.
Okay.
She mentioned that it was possibly the reason why we could hear Ziggy, and we could at no longer any other point in the series.
Yeah, I like that. I think it fit into what we were questioning when we were talking about that.
Just one issue. Why do we never see the watch again?
Well, right, but we don't. Yeah. So it feels possible. There is some correlation there between two things we're questioning, like, hey... And, maybe it only works for Sam. I don't know.
Or maybe Sam broke it in the middle of the leap somewhere.
Yeah, or maybe Al just really hates watches.
Yeah, perhaps. All right.
I have a shout out as well.
Okay, let's hear it.
For J.D. Schwartz.
That
is Scott Bakula's longtime publicist. He celebrated a birthday on Thursday, March 21st.
Oh, well, happy birthday.
Happy birthday to Jay. And we had the pleasure of meeting Jay on February 3rd when we went to see The Connector at the MCC Theater. Along with meeting Scott Bakula that day. Right. He's the one who physically took our pictures with Scott. So that was great meeting him. And he celebrated a birthday. And so there you go. Happy birthday to Jay.
Happy birthday, Jay Schwartz.
Who has been part of the Quantum Leap family for the whole 35 years, because he worked with Scott way back then, too.
Yep. And I still have his fingerprints on my phone. I don't think I've washed it or anything, so I have a little bit of something to remember him by. All right, so, Stacie, your thoughts on this week's episode.
Okay, so, if we're talking about as an episode of Quantum Leap, this isn't, like, the best leap, right? It's a little slow. It's definitely not, like, a favorite as far as, like, here's the leap of the week go.
Right.
But, of course, it's an iconic episode of Quantum Leap because it's the first.
Of course.
Because it's where we meet our characters. It's where we learn what this is, right? We talk about time travel. Being the first episode, not all of the rules are fully established yet.
And we don't have...
Some of the things that happen here, you know, we never see again. They're very different. They change. Like the imaging chamber door, for example, is weird in this episode.
Yeah, it was an unfinished effect. It was definitely not what we will eventually end up seeing in the series as a whole.
So
we don't even get the leaping effect yet.
Yeah, there's no leap.
Yeah.
We have 2 leaps in this episode, and we don't get to see a leap until we get to the next episode. So yeah, it's a very important, iconic episode simply because it's the first episode.
Right.
But it is a little slow and boring.
Now, we've mentioned many times that first episodes are hard.
Right.
Because you're introducing, in this episode, is introducing a crazy concept that needs a lot of explaining.
Exactly.
So, yeah, and the pacing of this episode is brutal. It's, you know, if we compare it to the current day Quantum Leap, the new one, the new series, it had the exact opposite problem.
Exactly. They overcompensated when making the pilot for the 2022 series.
I think if I'm going to pick a storytelling direction to go in, I'm going to pick Genesis, because that episode, the other one, the new one, just kind of flings things at you and expects you to, like, keep up. Whereas this one takes its time in explaining its concept and kind of, you know, eases you into it.
Yeah. But if this pilot were to air today... Yeah. I don't think that show would even finish its first season.
No.
Because the audience of today doesn't have the patience that audiences had in 1989.
I mean, facing facts, this is not a great episode of television. I would be hard-pressed to even argue that it's a good episode of television. However, it is a competent pilot. It tells the story. It introduces the concept and characters.
It is a must-watch episode for Quantum Leap. Because, again, this is where we lay it all out there.
Right.
I feel like I had a little bit more appreciation for the story this time around and writing notes on it than I have perhaps in past watches. For one thing, it really has a lot of real history in it. Like, okay, so this takes place at Edwards Air Force Base in California, which is a real Air Force base. We're testing the X-2, which was a real plane that was really used to try and get to Mach 3. Like, this is all real history, other than the actual names of the people involved are changed.
So, did the Mach 3 thing ever actually happen? Did they reach Mach 3?
Yes, so I have the real history of what all of the contents of this leap, and we're, of course, talking about the first leap in Genesis. There is another leap at the end of Genesis, but we'll talk about that when we get there.
Right.
So, this is from the Edwards Air Force Base website. And it said that in September of 1956, which is when this episode takes place, Captain Ivan Kitchenole became the first man to soar above 1,000 feet as he piloted the Bell X-2 to a then remarkable altitude of 126,200 feet. Flying the same airplane just weeks later on September 27th, Captain Mel Apt became the first to exceed Mach 3, accelerating to a speed of Mach 3.2, 2,094 miles per hour. His moment of glory was tragically brief, however. Just seconds after attaining top speed, the X-2 tumbled violently out of control, and Apt was never able to recover. While the loss of the X-2, the search for many of the answers to the riddles of the high Mach flight had to be postponed until the arrival of the most ambitious of the rocket planes, the North American X-15. So it's a brief moment in airplane history, but the X-2 was the first plane to reach Mach 3.
Yeah.
And that pilot did die during that flight.
Well, that is really unfortunate.
So actually, I have a picture I'm going to send you, and I forgot to do that ahead of time, but we're going to make sure we put that there for our video version of this episode.
Right. Yeah.
So everybody can see who Captain Mel Apt was, and he's standing there with the actual X-2 plane.
Gotcha.
To compare to, what we're seeing in the episode. So, the character of Tom Stratton is definitely based on Mel Apt. And then I feel like his friend...
Bird Dog?
Yeah, Bird Dog.
Captain Burdell.
Oh, here we go. I need this piece of paper in front of me still. That's the one that's got all the people's names on it. I feel like he represents the other guy, Captain Irvin Kinchol, because they were the two that were really testing this plane and testing Mach 3. And one thing I saw criticized on Al's Place, because I was, reviewing actually, I'm not sure if I saw it on Al's Place or in Beyond the Mirror Image, Matt Dale's book, because I was reading both of those entries on Genesis when I was taking my notes. And in one of those two places, I saw a criticism that said, well, it seems unrealistic that a pilot would forget that he couldn't turn around at such high speeds.
Okay.
So remember the time before, I mean, we'll get there when we get there in the story, but one of the other pilots, when doing their test run,
right.
they turn too early and crash.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's exactly what happened.
Oh, really?
When I read the further history of this. So no, it's not unrealistic. It's literally what happened.
Oh, all right.
No one's ever flown at these speeds before.
Right.
So no, they didn't know not to turn at those speeds because they'd never done it before.
Right.
And that's actually what happened when Captain Apt died, is he turned while he was still at too high of a speed, and that's when he crashed.
Gotcha.
So that reference in the episode, that's taken right from real history. And in that moment in the episode, that person lived.
Okay. Yeah.
But it was representative of a moment in history where the person did die.
Gotcha.
But one thing that felt a little funny is, in this episode, we have 2 X2s. Because that one crashes and burns, and then the next day Sam flies an X2.
I don't know. Maybe they have, spares.
I mean, in real history, there was one plane.
Right.
The X2 was one airplane, and when it crashed, it says they didn't, test this again until the X-15 came out. I don't know how long that was, but
gotcha.
There was only one X2, according to, the way I'm reading this history, or at least only one that they were testing in this manner.
Okay. Do you got anything else before we're going to move on?
No, we've got about 1 million guest stars in this episode, so I'll try and shout out some of their names as we meet them.
Yes, of course. So one thing I forgot to mention. Although, this pilot is not particularly great, at the same time, it's better than the first episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, Encounter at Farpoint, which was a terrible episode of television. So, yeah, it's definitely better than that, which this is actually around the same time. I think this was 89. I'm not sure when Star Trek Next Generation came out. I think it was 87 or something along those lines. So, yeah, this is pilots around this time, We're not that super great. And just in general are not super great.
Pilots are hard.
Yes, and we've, we have a recent example, when we first watched Extended Family.
Right.
Or even Sullivan's Crossing. I didn't even know if I liked the main character after that first episode.
Right.
And I grew to love both of those series. So... And, of course, I love this series very, very much after 35 years. All right. So, do we have anything else to get into before?
We're going to jump in and do what we do, which is go scene by scene through the episode. And we'll talk about the guest stars and all of the things and what we have to say about it as we go.
All right. So, the episode begins with Al, played by Dean Stockwell. I mean, you guys already pretty much know that, but...
I hope we know that much.
I'm going to assume that you haven't watched a single episode of our podcast, and I'm just going to play it like that.
Right, because watching this, you have to remember to kind of watch it with the idea that nobody watching this has ever watched Quantum Leap. Right? This was the first one.
Right.
You're coming at it from a world-building perspective, which is really different than that's not how they do it in season 4.
Right. No. So Al is speeding by in a car in New Mexico.
He's in a Ferrari Testarossa.
And he happens upon a very stranded, very attractive woman named, and she's credited as Tina in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
She's wearing these high heels with these flashing lights.
They glow. All of the accessories, even Al's accessories, are light up. So this is 1989's version of what the far future of 1995 looks like. Everything's glowing.
I don't remember everything glowing like this. Maybe this is a Mexico thing or a New Mexico thing.
Oh, yeah, and that's another thing, is there's nothing but desert around them.
Yeah.
Where is she coming from? Why is she on this road?
I don't even see a car. Al makes a reference to a flat.
No, she's standing next to a car. You don't see the car, but you see, when you look at her feet, you can see the tires of the car. So
gotcha.
She is standing next to a car, but... okay, so I'm going to bring it up now. You have a theory.
Well, I'm not sure if I even buy my theory anymore.
Okay, you had a potential theory at one point talking about this episode.
But It was thought by me, mainly.
Right. I haven't seen this ever mentioned anywhere by any show people or anything, but Dave's headcanon, at least at one point, was...
Her name was Tina, and I assumed that this was meant to be the same Tina that we get reference to throughout the series, and even seen in The Leap Back.
Yeah, meaning Tina Martinez.
Yes, Tina
Al's long-term girlfriend.
Yes. And if you watch this episode and you assume that everything you're seeing is played straight, that theory does not hold up. Because Sam knows Tina.
Right. And so I remember pointing out to you, back when I first heard you say that theory.
Yeah.
That no, Al didn't meet Tina on the side of the road. He met Tina in Vegas. We learned that in How the Test Was Won.
Right.
That he met Tina at a card table in Vegas.
Yeah.
And she's working on Project Quantum Leap. And Sam does at many times remember Tina.
Right. And when he sees her again in The Leap Back, he definitely knows who she is.
Right.
So if you're to assume that this is straight, that there's nothing going on here besides what we're seeing on the screen, there's no actual subtext that we're not familiar with, then it actually doesn't make sense that this is the same Tina.
Right.
However, you can maybe fan wink this as being some kind of weird role play between Al and Tina. Like they're playing some kind of game where he's meeting her for the first time and then taking her back to his place or something along those lines. But, I mean, she continues to keep that going even though there's something alarming clearly going on. Like she sees the lights and there's clearly something going on back at the project. So I'm not so sure.
Okay, so you've changed your opinion.
Kinda.
You're more leaning towards this is just some random woman Tina. Who's also named Tina.
I mean, unless they're doing like a retcon and then, I don't know.
Okay, so that's a little funny because watching it this time, I was ready to tell you, I understand where you're coming from with your theory.
Okay, all right.
I know, like, there's no canon to have any concept that this is true.
Right.
Everything says this is a different Tina. Like, if you look at any official anything. Mm-hmm. But watching it this time and thinking about your theory, I could see that happening.
Yeah.
Like, knowing what we know about Al.
Mm-hmm.
And, not what we know yet, but what we know as a Quantum Leap audience, and watching this scene and thinking that that's what's happening, that this is Tina and they are just having some fun. Mm. It does make sense.
Yeah.
It does make sense of why is she in the middle of nowhere?
Right.
Who is she? And why does he bring her back to the project?
Right.
If this was just somebody he picked up, the only thing that really would have made sense is for him to be like, I'm sorry, I can't give you a ride, and kick her out of the car. Instead, he brings her to the secret project.
Right.
Which is weird if she's just some random person that was stranded in the desert.
Yeah, I'm assuming she would have to have some, or maybe she, just waited in the lobby.
Is there a lobby?
I have no idea.
But yeah, just going at it from that perspective, I felt like, okay, maybe you were onto something.
All right, so we've kind of reversed positions.
I'm not completely sold, but I could see that perspective.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Now this Tina, Tina, she's played by Barbara Horan.
Yes.
But the interesting thing about it is she's voiced over by Deborah Pratt.
I think I knew that at one point.
All of her lines that we hear is Deborah Pratt's voice.
Ah, gotcha.
Now, I've never seen anybody know why that's the case. Maybe they just didn't like her voice. The network or something. I don't know what the issue is. But all of her lines were voiced over by Deborah. Which seems like a really weird thing.
Right.
But that's what happened.
Okay. All right. So, she gets in the car. They're speeding away around. And it's a futuristic, car. And then they get a call. Or they notice the lights. And Tina.
And they're talking, about the... these lights in the background, and she says that she thinks it's some kind of lightning. Sheet lightning is what Al tells her.
Right. I thought they were going to say Aurora Borealis.
She tells us that's the spot where they set off the first atomic bomb.
Oh.
So we're setting our scene of exactly where Quantum Leap takes place. Yep. And she says it's rumored to still hold a top secret project.
Yes. And Al ends up calling into the project. Gushy is getting hit by wind. Where the heck exactly is Gushy?
Okay, so this is the wind. The accelerator is on.
Yes.
Okay, so when the accelerator's on, the rings spin.
Yes.
And it creates wind.
Was Gushy in there with him?
So Gushy's like standing just outside of the accelerator, trying to scream to Sam, and he's getting the wind. Now, I'm going to bring up the season 2 finale of the Revival series, which was the last new episode of Quantum Leap at the time that we're speaking, because there's a moment where somebody is about to get into the accelerator. I don't want to give too many spoilers about the new series in case people listening to this haven't watched that, but somebody's about to get into the accelerator during this episode. And then there's a team of people standing just outside of the accelerator room, and their hair and clothes starts blowing in the wind.
Yes. Okay. I thought that was the whole, like, basically the butterfly
effect. It was that the accelerator was blowing them, and then the lights that we saw was the butterfly effect, changing history around them. And when that episode aired, I saw a lot of people online being like, well, why is there wind blowing? Where'd that come from? It doesn't make any sense. And that's what we're seeing right here. We're seeing Gushy with that wind blowing around him, because that's what the accelerator does. It creates this wind tunnel.
And Gushy, by the way, is played by Dennis Wolfberg. I've talked about him before. I just did a couple weeks ago when we did the Leap Back. I'll bring it up again. He only has 5 acting appearances. The last one he will ever did was the mirror image, the series finale of this series. And he died a couple years after that, I believe, at the age of 48, which is really sad. I do know that he was active within the fan community. I think he had been to some conventions. So, you know, he was really connected to the fandom.
Yeah.
But...
So, Gushy tells Al, Sam is leaping. And, again, we see all the wind. Al tells Gushy not to interfere.
Yes.
Because any interference could kill him.
Yes.
And he says he'll be there in 2 minutes, and he zooms off to the project.
And then we have our credits, which is not yet the main opening credits, though if you watch it on
Peacock. Both of them, I think, Peacock and Roku, include, like, the regular series credits.
Which have basically, you know, images from episodes that were not going to happen for another couple of seasons.
Right.
But anyway, we're moving through the clouds.
Yeah, we see the pilot credits play out. We're basically getting a bird's eye view, and we're going through the clouds, and then it lands inside the Stratton household.
Sam wakes up, and he's thinking...
Well, I want to mention the clock.
Okay.
So we see this clock.
Yep.
And we see it clicking backwards.
Yes.
It goes backwards from, it starts at like it's zooming back.
Yep.
It goes to 4:59 and it stops. And then we see it click forward to 5 a.m.
Gotcha.
And you know what? That clock just really reminds me of the clock in Groundhog Day, where we would watch it tick over.
Yes. I'm sure
of course, this happened first.
Right.
Groundhog Day wasn't for a couple more years.
Well, that could have been a reference to this episode.
It could have been.
Yeah.
Probably not, but it could have been.
Yeah.
And I want to note that on the radio, the song playing is Que Sera Sera.
Which will come up multiple times in the episode.
You know what? I didn't remember this song being here. I knew the song's at like the end of the episode. I didn't remember it being here. And, of course, you know, that song took on a whole new meaning for us once we started covering the MGM Plus series From, which uses the song Que Sera Sera as their theme song. Yeah. A much creepier version of the song.
Yeah, I would say so.
Sam wakes up.
And he's saying to himself, it worked. But he doesn't know what that even means. He says, what worked? And he ends up hearing...
He can't remember who he even is. He was like, wait, what's my name?
Yes.
Where am I? What's going on?
He has total amnesia. And soon he notices a strange woman waking up next to him. He has no idea who this is, but she's very, very pregnant. And she's played by Jennifer Runyon. She was actually the co-ed that Bankman was flirting with in the original Ghostbusters movie, while he was basically torturing a classmate of hers.
Yeah, so she was in Ghostbusters with Ernie Hudson.
Yes, yeah.
Who's in the new series. I most know Jennifer Runyon from the Very Brady Christmas special.
Ah, gotcha.
She plays Cindy Brady in that. And that one was always a staple for me growing up. Every Christmas I'd watch the Very Brady Christmas. And she's the only Brady that was not played by the original cast member.
Oh, that's interesting.
Jennifer Olsen, was that her name? Cindy Olsen? No.
I'm not sure.
The girl who played Cindy, whose last name I think is Olsen.
Okay.
She did not come back for that special, and Jennifer Runyon played Cindy.
Gotcha. All right, so she refers to him as Tom, and Sam doesn't remember who he is and what's going on.
We get our very first oh boy
in
this scene.
Oh, yeah, that's right. And
he's narrating all of this in his head.
Yep.
So that's the narrative that we're setting up, is we hear Sam speaking to us through his own thoughts.
Peggy gets up to get breakfast ready and says that Bird Dog would be there pretty soon to pick him up. She practically shoves him into the shower, which he does with his boxers on, and she finds this very funny. Sam's become convinced that this is a dream, but it feels very real. And I think he looks at Burma Shave at this point.
Yeah, she handed him the shaving cream, so it's Burma Shave shaving cream, and he says, "Oh, I just got to shave, then I'll wake up."
Right.
Because shaving always wakes you up from your dreams, right?
I don't understand that, but whatever, Sam. So he ends up looking at the mirror. He sees a reflection that is not his own, and he starts freaking out.
Yeah, he knows it's not him.
Yeah. He asks Peggy, who's come into the bathroom, to say, "Who do you see in the mirror?" And of course, this makes him look like a total crazy person. And she says she sees him. And she also sees herself. And she's like, basically getting all insecure about her looks. He says that his name isn't Tom, which confuses her and starts to scare her a little bit. His son, Mikey, soon enters to tell him Bird Dog is on the phone. And he doesn't react very well to being called Dad. He's like, "Oh, I'm a daddy." And, you got another one out of the way. Just saying. You were about to be a daddy whether you saw Mikey or not.
Right.
So he runs out, hangs up the phone on Bird Dog.
Yeah, because he remembered a phone number.
Yeah, that's right.
Sam remembers a phone number, 555-2231. And he tells Peg this is the number to his office.
Right.
Meaning Quantum Leap. I don't know if you'd think of it as an office.
Right.
But okay.
I'm sure he has an office in there somewhere.
But Peg says the number to his office is Blockfield 847.
Oh, okay. So the phone is basically making some weird sounds, and she says that he's trying to dial way too many numbers.
Right. They don't use 7 digits yet. And he goes, "Well, perhaps I'm not dialing enough." But he can't remember the area code.
Right. So Sam notices on the TV that Howdy Doody is playing. And this is I don't know, is this a Back to the Future reference? Did that Howdy Doody scene in Back to the Future, was that the third one that we saw that in?
I don't know, but Howdy Doody was a very big deal in the 50s.
Right.
So it's in a lot of time travel
so it might
programs.
It might be a reference to, not Quantum Leap. It might be a reference to Back to the Future, or it may not be, but there's a very similar scene within those movies.
I feel like it's just something that has easy... what's the word? Like, it's easy to get rights to use.
Okay, probably.
Because it was, I don't know, it was iconic and it was everywhere. And it is used in tons and tons of, history pieces. Whenever we're taking place in the 50s, Howdy Doody's playing.
Right, okay. So he ends up going outside in his boxers with shaving cream dripping down his face. And he thinks it isn't a dream now, but he believes it's a nightmare. And sooner or later, the boogeyman is going to show up. And it's very funny that he says that, because eventually we're going to have an episode.
Yeah, it's great foreshadowing.
Yes.
He mentions it again later in this episode, specifically when we see Al.
Right. And that, of course, is the episode that you're not supposed to refer to by name.
Yeah,
according
but
to
we can say the name here.
Okay.
Because
we're not actually
not
talking
the name
about
of the
that
episode.
Yeah.
And while he's doing this, he also sees a plane doing maneuvers in the sky.
So we have a lot of plane porn in this episode. So we cut to Sam. He's driving with Bird Dog.
Captain Burdell, that is.
Captain Burdell, whose nickname is Bird
Right,
Dog.
and he's narrating in his head again that everyone thinks it's 1956, and he's an Air Force pilot named Tom Stratton with a wife named Peg and 1 2/3 children. His best friend is the officer behind the wheel, Captain Burdell, who everyone calls Bird Dog. His narrations do a great job of telling us what's happening.
Yes. Thank you very much, Sam. Otherwise, we would have absolutely no clue what the heck was going on. So Bird Dog makes a stop to hit on some girl.
Yeah, he earns the nickname of Bird Dog right here. This is exactly what that means. And
basically, this is to give us some more exposition. We learn that Tom Stratton and Bird Dog both fly the X-2. And he tells the girl that they are the only pilots brave enough to fly the X-2, which is not quite accurate because there seems to be a whole slew of pilots.
There's a few more pilots in the program, which the girl mentions one of them by name. And he's like, no, he's just there, but we're the real heroes.
So they get back on the road, and they drive for seemingly forever.
Okay, so while they're driving after this interaction, the song plays Hound Dog by Elvis.
Okay.
Now, I was so confused, and this actually hit me the last time I watched this episode when I was doing the rewatch, introducing the series to my husband. So when we watched this episode is when I first noticed this. I, in my head, have a super distinct memory that the song playing right here was the song Bird Dog by the Everly Brothers. And it's not.
Well, is it possible? Because I know they changed the music. And
so, I looked everywhere there is to look. I looked in Beyond the Mirror Image, which gives details about all the songs, about alternate songs that were used in different DVDs.
Okay.
No mention of this ever being a different song.
Interesting. Is this a Mandela effect thing?
It really could be. Like, I have such a distinct memory of that song connected to this scene. And he says, he learned why he's called Bird Dog. And then the song was Bird Dog, not Hound Dog. Interesting. Because, I don't know. It's just such a distinct memory. And I even went as far as, like, looking up the song Bird Dog and, like, looking for, a list of media that it's been played in. Yeah. And I only found reference that was ever played in one movie that I've never seen.
So it's actually a song.
It is a song.
Okay. But
it wasn't here. And I didn't find that it was ever used in any television that I would have watched.
Interesting.
And it's very similar to just, a couple weeks ago, we did Shock Theater, and I was super convinced I had this very distinct memory that Verbena Beeks was wearing a navy blue dress. Right. Yet she was wearing this bright red dress. And I see her wearing this navy blue dress, and I said, maybe that's the dress she's wearing in the lead back. She's not. In the lead back, she's wearing, like, lilac. Yeah, something along those lines. We've never seen her wearing a navy blue dress, but that's the image I have burned in my head, is that actress wearing a navy blue dress.
Maybe there was something wrong with your TV.
And this scene, I have a very distinct memory of them driving away and the song Bird Dog playing. Well, and I'm so confused.
I have no memory of either of those situations, so I couldn't tell you, but it very well could be just the Mandela effect. Maybe that was just a parallel universe.
It drives me crazy when something like that happens, so I had to bring it up because... All right. And this time it didn't shock me because I did notice this last time. Right. But last time I was like, where's the song I remember being here?
Right. Yeah. So we cut to a scene and it's Weird Ernie wondering how flying the Mach 2 is affecting their minds. And he's, of course, played by the legendary Bruce McGill.
So during the driving scene...
Oh, you want to go back to that? All right.
Well, that's where this sets up. So Sam told Burdell that he can't fly.
That's right.
And that's where... Bird Dog was like, let's gag them. That's a great gag. Apparently, they're always telling jokes.
Yeah, so I basically skipped that part.
This kind of joke goes on through the episode where they're trying to convince the other guys that they have memory loss because of flying above Mach 2.
And, all right, so Bruce McGill, he is one of the few actors to appear in both the premiere episode and the final episode, Mirror Image. He actually ends up playing Al the bartender. As I mentioned, he's pretty legendary as a character actor goes.
He has 168 acting credits.
Yes. Including, he has an appearance in Star Trek Voyager. He was also in My Cousin Vinny.
My Cousin Vinny, yep. As well as the movie Legally Blonde 2. He plays one of the politicians in that. He was in 18 episodes of MacGyver. Lots of things I recognize on his IMDb.
Oh, yeah. So they are in a group setting. And they are talking about how they are forgetting things. And Dr. Berger is tasked with putting together a study. And he's played by W.K. Stratton, who will also appear in 5 episodes of this series, including Goodnight, Dear Heart, which I covered barely.
He's the sheriff in Goodnight, Dear Heart.
I didn't really talk about that episode very much. But he's also in the trilogy episodes.
He's also in the trilogy. He plays Larry Stanton, the lawyer, who is Sam's host in the final installment of the trilogy. Yep. And in addition to those episodes that he has credits in...
there was a couple
he also had voice appearances, which aren't on IMDb. I'm not sure why. They should be.
No, he's not credited.
But he is the voice of the dispatcher in both the episodes Hurricane and Black on White on Fire. Right. So he was around. They used him a lot. He was also in 16 episodes of Jag, which is one of Donald Belisario's other series. Yes. So maybe that's why he was nearby on set for them to grab when they needed a voice. It makes sense. And he was on 3 episodes of Magnum P.I. Right. Which, again, was
another Belisario series. Yep. Yeah. All right. So Sam sees Al for the first time in the crowd, but he doesn't realize he's a hologram or even who he is. And Al says to him, isn't it... so they end up leaving the scene. And Al is standing right next to him. He says, isn't this a kick in the butt? And basically Sam completely ignores him, which is a little weird. I figured Sam would say something to him, but then he'd be seen talking to himself, and they didn't want to do that.
They didn't want to do that yet.
Right.
We did get the, Al is here sound effect for the first time. So that was consistent. I noticed that we got that right away. We learned during this that Lamont is flying today.
Yep.
He's one of the other pilots who has kind of a role in this episode. There's a few of them, but he's one of the only ones that I caught on to who exactly he was.
Yes. So we have a scene of the wives discussing their stretch marks, and then we have a plane take off, which ends up shaking the house.
Yeah, so we're going to get sonic booms every time we hit the different mocks.
Right.
So that's what these women are dealing with. So throughout, we're going to have all these random scenes of them, like, looking up at the sky or, like, seeing something bounce around in their house.
I think maybe we could have done without some of these scenes.
Yeah.
And maybe that would have helped the episode pacing-wise. But, so Sam is starting to adjust to his nightmare, he says in his narration.
Yeah, so he's in the co-pilot seat of the bigger plane that's called Mother Hen.
Yep.
And this is the plane that drops the X2 in the sky. The X2 doesn't take off. It's in a drop plane. So Sam's in the co-pilot seat. Burdell is flying this bigger plane. And Lamont is going to fly the X2 today. So he's mounting up kind of in the back, in the rear of him. And probably a good place to mention him, if I can find him in all of this. Captain Tony Lamont is played by Larry Poindexter, who has 170 acting credits, including 8 episodes of JAG. Lots of JAG people I noticed in this episode.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these people that are in this episode are have, like, amazing Internet Movie Database page entries. They have, like, they're basically character actors who've been in plenty of things.
Yeah, you can tell that Belisario pulled people he knows to make the pilot.
Yeah.
Right? So he's in 8 episodes of that, and he's in an episode of Freaky Links.
Oh, okay. That's the one that Jessie mentioned.
Yeah.
Jessie being the daughter of Tommy Thompson, who would be a writer on the series as well as a producer. And I think he was an executive story editor as well at one point. So Sam is starting to adjust to things. And then he's tasked with flying the plane.
Right, because Bird Dog goes to the bathroom.
He starts to look dumbfounded
and immediately Sam fails to fly the plane. It just starts nosediving.
He doesn't even try.
Like, you'd at least have the knowledge, like, if you're flying a plane, to grab the gear thing, right? And try and hold it steady.
Right, I would have tried.
He doesn't. He just does nothing.
Yeah,
and screams. He screams.
So the plane starts to take a nosedive. This doesn't go unnoticed by the people on the ground, including Weird Ernie. Sam starts screaming. His pilot comes back and asks what's wrong, and Sam says he can't fly. And Bird Dog still thinks that this is some sort of prank.
He covers for him. He's like, you can't fool me.
Right.
You can do the gag on them, but not on me.
Right. And we have more Peggy back at the house looking worried. One of the pilots climbs into the X2. This would be the guy that you just... Lamont, right?
Lamont. Yes. Yeah, he's preparing for the drop. We're at 25,000 feet. And Al's there. He's standing by observing.
Right.
And Sam's like, is everyone okay back there where they're at? Because, this dude's just kind of standing there next to this airplane that's about to drop out of our floor.
And Bird Dog says, yep, everything's fine. So they drop the X2. It begins to fly. Both rockets are pushed. He gets to Mach 2 easily enough. Everything's fine until he hits 2.8. And then the warning goes off. And
we hear a boiling sound.
Yes.
Which they don't make notice of here, but that's going to become important later.
Lamont ends up mentioning it to Sam later.
Right. The skin temperature is 800 degrees. That's a very hot airplane.
I think I would burn up in that.
Well, that's the outs, like where the engine is.
Gotcha.
So yeah, the fire warning light's on, and he turns off the rockets.
Yep.
His speed's reduced to Mach 2.3. And he decides to turn around.
Which apparently is not a good thing.
So Burdell's screaming at him, do not turn above Mach 2. Do not turn above Mach 2, but it's too late.
Right.
Because he spins out of control and the plane goes down. Now, this is the moment I was referring to earlier. Where I did see some criticism saying that's unrealistic. Except that really did happen.
I mean, it would be unrealistic
in the real history
if it happened today, because we know better.
Right. Remember, these are the only pilots who have ever gone above Mach 2, and now they're trying to break Mach 3. This is very new stuff, and there's this little tiny group of people who know anything about it, and he panicked.
Right.
He panicked.
So the plane blows up, but Lamont gets out because he ejected just in time.
Yeah, and you see Peg and all of the other women in the base run out of their houses at the sound of the explosion. And then we see Lamont come down with his parachute.
Right. So we are now at a bar, and we see a shot of Weird Ernie and Dr. Berger at the bar. Bird Dog is bantering with one of the pilots and his wife, along with Sam and Peggy. Bird Dog ends up cutting into a dance. This is another pilot, right?
I think that was Lamont. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that was Lamont.
Okay.
And he was dancing with the woman from This Morning.
Oh,
that was the blonde that he was flirting with.
I didn't even know that. I've never made that connection.
Now, I have all the names of the women. I'm not 100%, but I think she's the one named Jeannie, played by Christine Poore. Oh. So the women are Jeannie, played by Christine Poore, Sally, played by Lydia Cornell, and Lucy, played by Layla Ivy. Two of them are the other pregnant wives, and one of them's that blonde.
Gotcha.
I think Jeannie's the blonde. Layla Ivy also played Chloe in the episode Heatwave.
Oh, okay.
And she was in an episode of Jag, and she was in the 1991 Addams Family movie.
Ah, see, I didn't look into any of these women.
I looked into a few people. There were so many people, though.
Yeah. I mean, basically beyond the people that I already kind of knew.
Right.
That are kind of, like, extremely noteworthy. But yeah. So Sam is adjusting to everything that's going on. He's admiring Peggy. He says the chemistry is definitely there. He asks her to dance, and as they dance, Sam ends up spotting Al. Peggy, of course, can't see him, and he makes an excuse for Peggy to sit one dance out, basically saying, hey, he doesn't want you to overexert yourself.
And they're dancing to the song Moonglow, by the way, which is the theme song for the movie Picnic.
Oh, good to know. And then he wanders over to Al, who he thinks is the boogeyman.
Before he goes over there, he asks Peg, like, hey, who's that guy?
Right.
By the jukebox. It was really kind of funny because she says, oh, that's Doug. Because one of the pilots is standing by the jukebox.
Right.
Doug being Captain Doug Walker, one of the other pilots. He's played by David Trent. And Sam's like, no, the one in the tux. And she's like, what? Nobody'd wear a tux here.
Right.
She thinks her husband's crazy at this point.
Yeah.
And that's when he's like, I'm going to go feed the jukebox. So he goes over to talk to Al himself.
So Al keeps saying about how this is great. You know, he remembers this. And Sam...
And this is also the scene where Sam refers to him as the boogeyman.
Yes.
He's like, oh, that's the boogeyman. That's who I've been waiting for.
Sam asks Al if he's dead. And Al thinks he's joking. He wonders how Al knows his name, but no one else does.
He thinks he might be in the state of reverse reincarnation that he entered in midlife. He has a great theory.
Yes, it's interesting.
Could that happen, do you think? That sounds scary.
I don't know. I hope not. Al realizes that Sam doesn't remember him, as people realize that people are seeing him to talk to people who aren't there. Oh, I think I just...
That was a weird sentence.
Okay, so...
Yeah, he's talking to himself.
Yes.
This is the first time we're seeing from other people's perspective. He's talking to himself, but of course, he sees Al. And Al should really be telling him, hey, like, you can't talk to me right now in public. But he's not doing that. He's being very reluctant to say anything to Sam because he's surprised that Sam doesn't remember. Apparently, they didn't know this was going to be a side effect yet.
Right. So Sam turns around, and when he turns back, Al is no longer there. Sam ends up chasing him out of the bar, and we see Al muttering to himself, walking towards the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, he has to walk like all the way to the end of the parking lot, farther than we ever see Al go to get to the imaging chamber door ever again.
So
after this,
it's weird because like any other time, it doesn't matter where Al is. He just opens the door. And
he's right next to the door. But in this moment, he has to walk to the door, and then he opens it like a regular door.
But we don't actually see the door.
We don't see the door, but we see the outline of like a regular door that opens, sideways, like a regular door.
Yes.
Like he swings it.
It's a very kind of Twilight Zone kind of feel at this moment. Sam pleads to the heavens that he would like to wake up now as he looks up to the sky.
Yes.
On the road, Sam talks about stripping, not stripping to perfection, but stripping on, I think it's striping. Striping. Striping on the road, which was apparently not a thing in the 1950s. I'm sure stripping was, though. Peggy cuddles up with him.
She thinks it's a good idea, by the way, to paint lines on the side of the road. Her husband's so smart.
And they talk about how much fun she had, and she mentions that Sam is acting very differently. She mentions that he didn't once talk about piloting or
she's starting to suspect something is up, right? Because he's not being himself.
And Sam kind of uses the billboards that he ends up seeing
he
as a
deflects
distraction
from the conversation, and he reads aloud the Burma Shave billboards,
Yep.
which this was a real advertising campaign, by the way. They took all this from actual history.
Sam reveals that he isn't Tom, isn't her husband, and when he woke up this morning, he didn't remember any of them.
Yeah.
This just succeeds in scaring the crap out of Peggy.
He goes as far as to say, my name's Sam. Like, he knows that much. That's not me in the mirror. I'm not your husband.
And realizing that he's scaring the crap out of her, Sam eventually lies and says he was just pulling a prank, specifically saying that he was being a real nerd.
Yeah.
Which is funny because that is not currently a 1956 term.
Yeah, she was relieved because she thought he had a brain tumor, but she wants to know what a nerd is.
Right. The next morning, the clock seemingly speeds up, and we reverse from the house into the clouds, and then back into the bed, and we hear the leaping effect, but we don't see it.
Right.
Later, we learn that this is the project trying to retrieve him, but we don't know what's going on at this moment. Sam lies in bed and manages to remember things about his life, such as his sister Katie.
Yeah, he remembers he grew up on a dairy farm in Indiana until he was 18, which that's not true, but we'll chalk that up to the Swiss cheese and not, an inconsistency, because we know he left home at 16.
Right.
But yeah, he remembers Indiana. He remembers his sister Katie, who married a naval officer, Lieutenant Jim Bonnick. And that his mom has lived with them in Hawaii ever since his dad died in 1974.
Now, was Jim the abusive one?
No, so that was Chuck.
Oh, Chuck, okay.
Her second husband is Jim Bonnick, who she theoretically is with in the current timeline.
Right.
And that's why they're living in Hawaii. Now, he does have to be wrong about the fact that they've lived there ever since Dad died in 1974, because Katie was still young when Dad died in 1974.
Right.
And she had to marry abusive Chuck first.
Right.
Then she got to marry Jim Bonnick.
Right.
So it had to have at least been a few years before they went to Hawaii.
You would assume.
Now,
unless that's a really messed up story.
A very interesting tidbit here is Jim Bonnick is the name of a character from Magnum P.I.
Oh, okay.
Who lives in Hawaii.
Sweet deal.
So the not quite canon, but fan canon is that Katie is married to a character on Magnum P.I.
Oh, all right. That's pretty neat.
Yeah. And if you want to make an extra layer of meta-ness to that, in the episode Another Mother, Susan Bruckner, who is played by Olivia Burnett, the same actress that plays Katie Beckett, is totally taken by Magnum P.I. She watches the show. She's a big fan. She loves it. She's in love.
Oh, okay.
So that's kind of neat. And, we know that they did want to do a crossover at some point. That was something that Belisario had talked about, and they never quite did it.
Yeah.
But maybe that was their plan, was to have some crossover involving Katie Beckett and this Jim character.
Okay.
I mean, that would have worked, right?
Who was Jim played by in that series?
I have no idea. I've never watched Magnum P.I.
It wasn't Tom Selleck, was it?
No, it was a minor character.
Gotcha.
But I've never watched Magnum P.I. I don't know anything about that.
I've watched a few episodes, but it's been so long since I've seen an episode of that series. But all right, so he realizes that this is 56, and his dad is still alive. He tries to call, but he doesn't have enough details, and he's forced to give up, and he's really emotional in the scene.
I'm going to note, we hear the home theme for the very first time during this.
And his son ends up seeing him and asks him what's wrong, and Sam says he's just catching a cold. His son suggests that they could skip the fishing trip, but Sam says nothing will stop that. On the fishing trip, Sam proves to be a bad fisherman.
Yeah, Mikey's much better at fishing than Sam is.
Mikey is also a much better fisherman than I am. I would have done worse than Sam. I would have caught a tree or something.
He did catch a tree. That's what Sam did.
I thought it was on the ground.
No, he got stuck in a tree.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I am just as bad as Sam.
So Al appears in his pajamas. He's wearing a polka dot bathrobe.
And it's interesting that Al tells him that his name is Albert because he will not refer to him as such for the rest of the series.
Yes, he refers to himself as Albert. And the name Albert's used a few times throughout this episode.
Yep. And he says that he can't tell him very much. Much of what Sam wants to know, the rules prevent him from telling him. If you don't know it, he can't say it.
He also says he has a hangover and he should have stayed in bed with Tina.
Yes.
But which Tina?
Right. Is it the one he was on the side of the road with, or the Tina that he's actually in a relationship
dating?
with? All right, so he reveals that he's a hologram that only he can see and hear. Sam starts to remember some of the science behind it and is curious as to how he even knows that. Al starts to say that Ziggy has come up with 5 different scenarios, and once again, Sam confuses Ziggy with Gushy.
Right, he's like, oh, the small guy with the bad breath.
Right.
No, that's Gushy.
Right. Al tells him that Ziggy is a hybrid computer, and Sam asks him what his last name is. But Al tells him if he doesn't remember it, he can't tell him. And mostly it's probably to prevent Sam from doing exactly what he does in this episode,
right.
which is to call his dad.
And then we get the very classic line.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That he is part of a time travel experiment that went a little caca.
Yep. And that's been on T-shirts and all sorts of things. I think, don't you even have a T-shirt that's like that? That says that?
I don't.
You don't? Okay.
It's something I've been trying to put into our Zazzle store that I
Right.
haven't actually manufactured yet, but I've got to get on that.
All right. And you should start from scratch. You should, needlepoint and everything. Just kidding. Al tells him that the project is experiencing technical difficulties in retrieving him. And Sam asks, whose brainchild is this anyway? Al's? And Al says, nope, not his.
Right.
Al needs to find out why they couldn't retrieve him, and that they tried last night, and Sam wouldn't leap.
And Al thinks it's because he told someone that he wasn't Tom.
Yes.
Which is silly.
Right. Sam was basically like, well, they didn't believe me. How could they? I don't even believe me. And Al...
we also learn here that the real Tom is in the future with him.
Right. Which is an important detail.
His memory is full of holes, too.
Mm-hmm.
And he says that they can attempt retrieval again on Tuesday.
Why? My question is, why is it going to take that long?
Science?
I guess. Okay. So Sam thinks he's going to be a little late. That's going to be a little late because he's set to fly the X2 on Monday. And Al helpfully suggests that maybe he take some flying lessons. I think that might be good in this situation. So we cut to a picnic. Sam is playing ball with Mikey.
And I don't think we mentioned the son Mikey is played by Christian Van Dorn.
Mm-hmm.
This is his only credit on IMDb.
Yes.
This little boy never did anything else.
And it's funny because he's not that bad as child actors go in this episode. So the girls are gossiping in the kitchen, and a plane flies overhead. Peggy looks worried, but Mikey is impressed. Sam joins Peggy in the kitchen. He grabs a beer and asks her how she is because she doesn't look okay. Peggy blames it on the heat, and Peggy says to go join Mikey. He mentions that he hasn't spent that much time since he got hit by a car.
Hit by a bus, actually.
That's a really weird
It was a really weird statement that never came back into anything.
Right.
I noted that too. I was like, that was a weird thing to say. Like, why are we bringing up some subplot that the kid was hit by a bus?
Oh, remember that time that Mikey got hit by a bus? That's like, that's a really weird thing to just casually throw out there.
Yeah.
But anyway, so he ends up going back out to the picnic. But first, Peggy kisses him passionately, and apparently he kisses differently because she reacts very confused to the kiss. And that is where we end part 1.
And it says, to be continued.
Yes. And of course, originally when this episode aired, it was just one long episode.
It was one long episode.
But for, subsequent broadcasts, they broke it into 2 episodes.
Streaming, right now, it's on Peacock and Roku channel. Both of them cut the episode right there. So that's where we're cutting for episodes 1 and 2. And what we're going to do at this time is take a quick intermission.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're watching on YouTube right now, we are going to share a very special presentation with you talking about celebrating 35 years of Quantum Leap.
Amazing.
And we've got some very special guests. Deborah Pratt, you already mentioned, is one of them. So make sure you stick around to see what everybody has to say about remembering Quantum Leap. And then when we come back from intermission, we're going to keep going and we are going to cover part 2 of this episode. And if you're listening on one of the podcast platforms, you're going to have to head over to YouTube to catch that special that we're about to play right here in our YouTube version of the video.
All right, so let's check it out. We'll be back.
"97 episodes, 5 seasons, over 100 total leaps,
two unforgettable stars. The original Quantum Leap ran from March 26, 1989 until May 5, 1993. We followed the iconic Scott Bakula and Dean Stockwell as Dr. Sam Beckett, who traveled through time, righting wrongs, and his holographic cigar-smoking sidekick, Al. The anthology series touched on all genres of storytelling, from comedy, action, romance, thriller, horror, and everything in between. Sam was an Air Force test pilot, numerous athletes, lawyers, a mother, and a soon-to-be mother. He was a hairdresser, a mobster, a con man, a psych patient, a rape victim, a college student, a housewife. He was once himself, and he was once his own ancestor. He was a child. He was even a chimp. Dr. Sam Beckett taught us to walk a day in the life of a stranger. He taught us about acceptance and understanding, about righting wrongs in the world around us. Even after the last episode, Mirror Image, aired for the first time, the series continued in syndication, as well as releases on Laserdisc and VHS formats, and then later DVDs, Blu-rays, and streaming. There were also 18 novels, 13 comic books, and various reference books that continued the journey of Sam and Al. Over the years, there were many false starts at continuations, revivals, or reboots, and finally, in 2022, the next iteration of Quantum Leap became a reality. With 2 seasons and 31 episodes currently under its belt, the 2022 series follows a new leaper, Dr. Ben Song, who travels through time, righting wrongs. He is joined by the team of Addison, his hologram and fiancé, Magic, one of Sam's hosts who restarted and now runs the project, his best friend and programmer Ian, and head of security Jen. While Season 3 has not been confirmed, we are hopeful that the current show will get the opportunity to continue telling amazing stories, and that the Quantum Leap franchise as a whole can prosper and grow. There are many tales left to tell, many shoes left to walk in, many leaps left to take. Let's celebrate 35 years of Quantum Leap.
Hey guys, this is Dave and Stacie from Korman Productions Deep Dive TV Podcast. If you're watching this during the course of our podcast, you've already heard from us, but otherwise you might also be listening to this separately because we're going to be doing this as a separate project as well. First of all, I'd like to thank all the people who contributed. Deborah Pratt, the amazing Deborah Pratt. She's had some good things to say. All right, Stacie, 35 years of Quantum Leap.
We're celebrating 35 years that Quantum Leap has been in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Genesis aired on March 26, 1989, and ran for 5 years, right? So my history with Quantum Leap, I'll tell you, I was not watching Genesis on March 26, 1989. I would have been 6 years old at that time.
Yes.
So it was probably a couple years before I discovered Quantum Leap.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember what my first episode was, but I feel like it had to have been sometime like season 4 or 5 that I discovered the series. And probably only saw a handful of episodes when they originally aired.
Right.
But I definitely know after the series ended, like immediately after, when the show was airing every day on USA Network, I was watching it then.
Mm-hmm.
I had, when I meant to bring it here, but I don't have it in front of me, it's upstairs, the Quantum Leap A to Z book.
Yes.
I've had that since I was
a
child.
Many times.
Quantum Leap A to Z, written by Julie Barrett, one of the first reference books for Quantum Leap. And I had many of the novels that were coming out around the same time, and I was reading those. But I had my A to Z book, and I have notes in the book of when episodes were airing on USA.
Mm-hmm.
So I was writing, like, the dates on each episode. So I'd make sure I'd hit the ones that I love, my favorite episodes. So I was watching the show pretty regularly at that point, like rewatching episodes, watching full playthroughs over and over. And I do remember the first time I saw Genesis.
Okay.
It was sometime after the series ended.
Mm-hmm.
And I was on USA, and the last episode aired, Mirror Image. And it was not my first time seeing Mirror Image, so I'd already cycled through the series a couple times.
Right.
You know, catching different episodes, of course, and making sure certain ones I loved. And I very distinctly remember I was excited because Mirror Image ended, and that meant the pilot was next, the first episode, which I knew I had never seen. And I was like, I'm so excited to go back and watch the first episode because I know I haven't seen that one before, even though I've seen other episodes multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember very clearly sitting in my childhood bedroom because, you know, I had a TV in my room. Look where that gets you. And I remember tuning in to watch the first episode for the first time after, you know, the series has ended. And I remember thinking, oh, that's not a great episode. That seems kind of silly and boring and pointless.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, looking at it now, you can have a new appreciation for the fact that this is where it started.
This is where it all began.
Right? And if you watch our full podcast about Genesis, which is releasing simultaneously with this, so it is available on YouTube if you are already in that video, or if you're watching this separate, you can go back and find the full video of Genesis, where we talk in a lot of detail about that episode.
Yes, and surprisingly enough, it did not end up 3 hours.
I know, right? We're getting better at this.
I guess so. We got a lot more concise.
So tell me about your history with the series as a kid.
I actually know the first episode of Quantum Leap that I saw, and It's a Wonderful Leap.
Okay.
And I was watching with my parents and my Uncle Gary. And I was like totally confused watching this episode. I'm like asking questions like, what the heck is going on here? Like, why is Al moving through things? And like, I was totally confused watching the episode. But I fell in love with the series. Like, and I had actually managed to catch some, what do you call those things? Where I can't remember I can't remember the actual thing. Marathon. Like, they had Quantum Leap marathons on USA.
Yeah.
And this was well before the series was over. And I watched many of those marathons. I didn't catch every episode. I definitely watched some of those episodes when the DVDs came out. I finally actually managed to catch every single episode. Right. But, yeah, so I remember watching The Leap Home. And it in its original form, like where it was the full movie version.
Yeah.
That USA aired it like that. And that was pretty amazing. But yeah, I was definitely, by the time season 5 aired, I had watched quite a few Quantum Leap episodes, but there were plenty that I had not watched. And I remember reading the books. I remember actually being sick and staying home from school one day. My mom actually bringing me the first Quantum Leap book that I think it was from a book fair or something along those lines. So I read the novels, including For Our Knowledge by Christopher Del Filippis.
Which we met.
Yes, we did. And pronunciation, once again, not my greatest strong suit. Words, generally, not my greatest strong suit. But yeah, I remember reading that novel. And only recently making the connection. Like, oh, wait. The Quantum Leap podcast has the guy who wrote Foreknowledge in it? So yeah, that was pretty amazing. It's been an amazing 35 years. I love the show way back when. I was really bummed when the series ended. And the way that series ended, oh man. See, I was okay with the episode for the most part, but then we got to that stupid title card and I'm like, you're leaving it there? And this was very traumatizing for a 12, 13-year-old at the time. And it just sat in my heart for years. I was hoping that I could convince NBC to renew the series because we started doing ratings at the time, like at the end. And I'm like, hey, if you say you've watched Quantum Leap a lot, then maybe they'll bring it back. And of course, that didn't work. But as strategy.
Well, it worked, to get us season 5. I mean, yes. I wasn't involved in any of that, but I knew there was, all those write-in campaigns.
Yeah.
Started back then in the early 90s.
Yep.
And it did work to get us as much of it as we did end up getting.
Yes, and I definitely cherish everything that we got. We've certainly seen plenty of series that went on way too long and flamed out. Quantum Leap never had that.
Yeah.
I mean, it did get weird
Some
in season 5.
Some of my favorite episodes are in season 5.
Right.
In fact, my favorite episodes are trilogy.
Right.
My favorite episode is 3 episodes, if that tells you anything about me.
Yeah.
That it's got to be a 3-part arc that I call my favorite. What's your favorite if you had to pick one?
Well, I had mentioned that I'm really fond of Last Dance of Execution because I was always drawn to the darker, more dramatic episodes. And beyond that, I would say like the obvious episodes, like MIA,
the classic, iconic episodes.
Yeah, Future Boy is pretty up there in my mind, and and I said, I mean, when we got to see Scott Bakula, when we went to the Connector to see him, and we got his autograph and managed to talk to him, I told him that he was one of my childhood heroes because he absolutely was. Like, I don't have many. Like, I Patrick Stewart, Scott Bakula, and there's a hockey player called Kevin Dineen that used to play for the Whalers back in the day. But that's basically it. So it was incredible when we went to see him. And I was definitely following Scott Bakula's career after the series ended. He didn't really do much for a while. He was in like a TV movie. He was in Lord of Illusions. Necessary Roughness, I think, came out when he was in Quantum Leap. And then eventually he got another sci-fi series and got to be a captain in Star Trek Enterprise and be one of those captains. So he's had multiple iconic roles.
Yeah.
And Dean Stockwell, amazing character actor.
Yeah. I was, of course, very excited to see Dean Stockwell in The Langoliers.
Yes.
Which I cite often as being my favorite Stephen King adaptation for film. People think I'm crazy because it is one of the worst films. But I just love that story. And probably because Dean was in it was the reason I loved that movie so much.
So I think that kind of falls into the category of like B movie territory. Like, it's not actually objectively good, but it's like one of those movies you watch because it's kind of so bad.
It's funny. I just always loved it, and I love seeing Dean in it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked favorite episodes.
Yeah.
Least favorite?
Oh, okay.
Quantum Leap episode?
That one's
original series?
That one's actually a little easier to answer. I would probably say Genesis is up there. I think that might be one of the weaker episodes of the series, which is actually a good thing in my mind, that the pilot episode is one of the weaker episodes. But, we talked about Heart of a Champion. I mean, like, I'm not a big wrestling fan, and I think that they kind of undermined the story with some of the goofy stuff that they were doing during that episode with Tyler Funk.
Yeah.
And, I mentioned many times that I was not a big fan of A Portrait for Troyan.
Sorry, Deborah.
Yes. You're great as Ziggy, but maybe not necessarily as that character, Troyan. In fact, almost every actor in that episode was bad.
I feel like I've seen you say like that's just a really unbelievable story and kind of out of context.
Well, it's very Scooby-Doo-ish.
Yeah.
And like the plot is like impossible to pull off. Like if you really think about it for anybody. I mean, granted, a lot of episodes are like that, but given the fact that and I also don't like gothic horror. That's one of the reasons why I was not particularly fond of that episode. How about for yourself?
Well, I was thinking about this, and I feel like the ones I like least are probably the ones that are least memorable for me, so they're not going to come to my head. But I pulled out two that I'd probably put in my bottom grouping. Played Against Seymour. Okay. I was never gave a care about that episode.
It's funny because when I was a kid, I didn't like that episode when I saw it. I only gained an appreciation for it in my later years, fairly recently when I covered that episode again because of all the Casablanca references and, being a student of film. And, I appreciate it for those reasons. But go on.
And the other one that I came to my head when I was trying to think of which episodes do I really not like. The other one I thought of was Dreams.
Okay, I could see that.
In that episode, it was forgettable for me. Every time I'd come around to that, I'd be like, wait, which episode is this? Like, what's going on here?
It really disturbed me as a kid.
It was disturbing. I mean, I love horror.
Yeah.
So I'm not, like, scared by, like, the creepiness of an episode. I was watching horror movies probably before I discovered Quantum Leap, to be perfectly honest, when I was 6 years old. Because, it was the 80s.
Right. I mean, I watched Die Hard as a kid. I can't imagine, like, letting...
So, it's not like the episode scared me, but it was creepy in a weird way. That, like, just didn't... I was like, okay, that's a thing. Like, I don't need to see that again.
Right.
So, yeah, that's probably close to the bottom for me.
All right. We have anything else to say, I think?
Well, I think they've probably heard enough of us rambling.
Yes.
So why don't we go ahead and we're going to play for you some similar stories from our friends in the Quantum Leap community.
Yes.
So we have some special guests. We're going to let you hear from them what they have to say, their memories of Quantum Leap, including a very special clip from Deborah Pratt herself discussing the invention of Quantum Leap.
Mm-hmm.
And make sure you check out all of their links and their projects and their shows and all of their things, including warrior1world.com for Deborah. She will mention that again in her clip. And keep celebrating Quantum Leap.
Yeah, let's make it another 35 years.
If you haven't seen the Revival series yet,
yes,
which I'm sure there's some people here who haven't, I am going to make a little pitch for it. It is not the same.
It definitely is
not the same. Dean is gone.
Yes.
He's not with us anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Scott does not want to make an appearance in the new series.
He has said that multiple
times.
Sucks
as a fan, but you know what? That's his prerogative, and
we
have to accept it.
When he initially said that, I was disappointed, but I also said that I respected his decision. You know, if he doesn't want to return to that character, that is totally his right.
Right.
And I
so
respect it.
We watched this new series.
Yep.
We covered the new series.
We did.
Every episode in our podcast, so you can go see those.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people didn't want to give the new series a chance and have not watched it yet.
Yeah.
Other people watched 1 or 2 episodes, said, nah, it's not for me, it's not the same, and quit. So I'm going to speak to you. Give it another shot. Because honestly, both of us said the pilot episode is the weakest of the entire series.
It absolutely
So if that's all you watched, keep going. Give it a chance. We mentioned this during our Genesis podcast, which you just heard if you're watching this in that context. In episode 2, we get a direct reference back to Genesis. We have a returning character from Genesis, sort of, kind of, which is super cool that those connections exist. It's not a reboot. It's a revival. It's a continuation of the world of Quantum Leap. Yes, it's different. Yes, the whole setup is different. We spend half our time in the project, half our time in the leap. It's a little rough in the beginning. But they get a lot better at balancing that. And by the time we got to the end of season 2, which is where we're at right now in real world time, it's great. I love it. I feel like they did such a great job doing fan service to the fans of the original series, as well as, cultivating this new culture of Quantum Leap.
Absolutely.
And so if you haven't checked it out, or if you gave up in one of the early episodes, I do highly recommend you go watch the show. 2 seasons are available on Peacock, 31 episodes, and we are currently waiting to hear if there's going to be a season 3. If you want there to be a season 3, which I hope everybody who is celebrating 35 years of Quantum Leap wants Quantum Leap to continue, so that we can continue to grow even past this series.
Yes, Deborah Pratt, as we're going to see her say, she still wants that movie with Sammy Joe and Scott Bakula. If it's canceled, it's quite a bit harder for that to ever come to pass.
Right. So if you want Quantum Leap to continue, we need this series, the 2022 revival, to continue. So let NBC know that you want season 3. They are in the decision-making process right now. They're going to decide in April, and then they're going to let us know in May at the upfront. So we're running out of time to let them know. So let them know that you want to see it. Go binge those episodes if you haven't seen them, or if you have, go watch them all again because they're great. And that's just my bit for the revival. I know not everybody loves it, but I'm going to quote this. I've quoted this before. I'll use Al's language from the Dr. Ruth episode. I love Quantum Leap Revival differently than I love the original. The same way that, Al realized he loves Tina differently than he loved Beth.
Yes.
And Beth, by the way, spoiler alert, is in the revival.
She is.
Go check it out.
More episodes than she was ever in the original series.
Yeah, she's in several episodes. So it is worth watching, I promise. You might not love it the same, but I promise you it's worth watching. So give it a shot.
All right. Do we have anything else to say?
And I just hope that, we can continue more Quantum Leap.
Absolutely.
This discussion has carried on 35 years. 33 of those years was before the revival came.
Right.
The conversation was still going. There's still all of these amazing, the Quantum Leap podcast, Al's Place fan community, all of these great places and resources and books like Matt Dale's Beyond the Mirror Image book series, which the first edition of that came out long before the revival.
Right, and there's some comic books as well.
Right, of course. Quantum Leap hasn't gone anywhere.
Nope. There's even there was a fan film, A Leap for Diana.
A Leap to Die For.
Yeah. That had Sam leaping in to save Princess Diana or something along those lines.
Yeah.
And actually Deborah Pratt was in that.
She was, yes.
As Ziggy.
So my point is just like, I hope that as a fandom, we continue to grow and enjoy all of these clips we're about to show you. Thank you for hanging out with us and celebrating 35 years of Quantum Leap. And we're so excited to see what comes in the future.
Absolutely. And then after all those clips play, you can still continue to listen to us babble about the second half of Genesis. All right. So we're going to leave it there because I don't think I'll give my big selling point about our show. But
there it is.
Oh, yeah.
So go check out our playlists if you happen to be new to us.
Yeah.
And we have lots of great stuff there.
Yeah. All right. So this is Dave and Stacie from Korman Productions signing off.
Hello, Dave and Susie. This is Deborah Pratt. I am sending you this video per your request. I cannot believe it has been 35 years since Quantum Leap came on the air. And first and foremost, I want to say to the fans, thank you very, very much for your support over all these years, for your love, for your letters, for your passion. I think that you have given us the rare honor of being the heart of a fan base. Okay, so the question that you asked me was, where did the concept of Quantum Leap come from? And I think it best describes my story of how it fell together in my mind conceptually, and then how the pilot was built and how the show became what it is then and what it is today. So we were reading a book, we being me. I was reading a book called A Short History of Time by Stephen Hawking. And I'm a nerd, bottom line, it's heavy science fact, quantum physics. It was a gift from a writer. Her name was Deborah Pratt, I believe. Anyway, so I'm reading this book and I come across this section that talked about quantum leaping and that a quark can be in one place at any distance from another quark and they can trade places. And I thought that was an incredible idea and an incredible opportunity to create a story about time travel. I'd been wanting to do an anthology for a long time. I think my first remembrance of television, so this was back in the late 50s, early 60s, I was maybe 10. And my favorite show on television was the Loretta Young Show. It had been on the air, I found out, since 1953. But Loretta Young produced it. She was the star of it. And every week she would come out in these beautiful dresses and she would talk to the audience. And then she would go back through the door, come out through this door, and then talk to the audience and answer a question, I believe, from a letter that fans had sent her. And she would go in and then she would become that character. And I thought, I wonder how we could do this using this principle of quarks. The fact that you could actually switch places with someone. So I'm reading further into the book and it says Einstein's theory of relativity defines time and space as limited. So that means three people talking in a room, you as a leaper in time could never just appear as a fourth person in the room because time and space is limited. You would have to knock somebody out or trade places with them. So I thought, okay, where would they go? But most important, would the people in the room still see the person that was standing there? And I just determined that, yes, because we project who we are. So there's this energy that's in front of us. And the people around you And then I made up the idea that except for children under 5 and animals would know that you were not who you were. You were the leaper. Anyway, so the leaper would leap in and everyone would see them as who they are. So then the question was, how would we, the audience, do it? And that was a Brandon Tartikoff question that was asked when we went in to pitch the show. So we came up with the idea that they could see themselves in the mirror. They could see, not themselves, they could see who they leapt into in the mirror. And then I remember when we pitched it to Carey McCluggage, and he liked it. He got it. The visionaries of the world that were are so few and far between now. And he sent us on to Brandon Tartikoff, God rest his soul. And Brandon heard the pitch that this guy is a scientist and a physicist. He leaps into, he's created a time machine and he leaps into another time and can't get back. And then Don came up with the idea that it should be a military-owned piece of technology. And he wonderfully said, and he's got a hologram that travels with him. This was an idea I absolutely loved. So Dean would represent this military admiral, Calavici, and he would be our voice in the present, because we would be stuck in the past once Scott Bakula, who was a dream actor to write for, to work with, everything that Scott was, we used. I loved going to Scott's dressing room and saying, what did you do as a kid? He played baseball, basketball. He was incredibly athletic. I had seen some of his work on Broadway, and his ability to sing and dance inspired me to write a number of episodes that really exploded, I think, off the screen. But most important, it was this anthology of storytelling. And what I knew based on, at the time, I think it was Steven Spielberg had created a show called Amazing Stories, and it didn't do well. And I said, that's because you need somebody to what they call bookend it. So you would have Rod Serling or Boris Karloff, but the first one that ever did it was Loretta Young. It was a woman. I have always wanted a woman leaper. I think that's why I created the Easter egg of Sammy Joe being in the future, trying to bring him home, and built that into the show. I'm still working on that as a movie. I haven't given up. I do want to bring Scott home. That was another huge argument that I had with Don and the studio and the network, saying, don't bring him home, because as long as he's out there, the fans will stay with us. And you did. You absolutely stayed with us. What else can I tell you? The stories were easy. It became a show that could tell any story at any time. Don, because of budgetary constraints of the show, had made the rule up that he could only leap within his own lifetime. And I found a way to bend around that, where he could leap genetically, which is why we did one show that was supposed to be my show, but I had to jump on another show. And I can't remember who wrote it. Was it Chris Rupenthal? Where he leapt into his grandfather. So that was, a set of the lore that I had added. It's a wonderful show. It could never go out of fashion. I believe, and will say 1,000 times, it has the capability to, like Star Trek, have 9 spin-offs and 9 motion pictures and still keep going and keep growing, because Quantum Leap has what I always tell to every writer and everyone that will listen, the 4 H's. It has heart, it has hope, it has history, it has humor, but truthfully, it has 5. It has humanity. And what we can do that no other show can do is we can leap Sam and now leap Ben into the life of someone else's shoes. It was always designed to walk in someone else's shoes. The first time I wrote him as a black man, I got big time pushback from the network, from the studio, from Don, saying that's a year 3 thing. And I went, no, it isn't. And we did it in the first season, and it put us on the map. And I got to deal with racism in a safe place because people could think, oh, that happened long ago. And though it's still going on today, it allowed for a conversation to happen, an art that we in America have lost the ability to do. I think that humanity, the chance to walk in the shoes of a woman or the high heels of a woman and deal with sexism. And what I loved about Scott doing that was that he embodied that character with all the extra parts and what it was like to wear a girdle and sit on a cold chair, stockings and sit on a cold chair. He said he had new respect for women. I wrote him as a young pregnant teenager. And also, I want to talk about the fact that, and we still are getting letters on the new series, and thank you all for coming, of people who were so moved by the show and so affected by the show, where each episode seemed to touch a group of people. And if every letter represents 20,000 letters, I am beyond grateful that you pick up a pen and you write, or you send in, now these days you send an email to Universal Studios or NBC network, and you tell them that we need this show. Now than more than ever, we need this show. So I'm grateful to have been able to create something so special, and to have, you know, a Don Belisario who represented all the people that get things like that done. I'd only created one other show, and it had gotten squashed by the writer's strike back in '87. And then when I brought him Quantum Leap in '88, it was decided that to be seen and be heard, it needed his face up front. I regret that I didn't get a credit, but everybody that knows I co-created this show, and I'm proud of it. And we'll take it as far as the franchise will go if given the opportunity. In the interim, please join me at Warrior One, warrior1world.com. It's my next franchise, and it has hope as well for a future and for all the generations, the young people in this generation who question, can they make it in this world? It's about choosing courage. It's about being fearless. It's about being willing to learn what it takes to survive. So I'm really proud of Warrior One and the Vision Quest series. But I think my heart, the core of my heart, will always be the creation and the ideas of Quantum Leap. I hope we go on forever. And I know if we do, it's because of you. And come back and see us. And when I get to do the story to bring Scott home, or come play with us. Deborah Pratt, it's a pleasure as always, and thank you.
Hi, I'm Carla, and I'm a fan of Quantum Leap as well. Although I haven't really watched the original series since it first aired, so I got a bit of catching up to do. But I do remember that I loved it, and I always enjoyed watching it with my parents. I'd watch it before bed. And when I heard that there was a newer series coming out, I was so excited, and I'm really, really glad that it's not a reboot, that it's continuing the stories on. I really like that. And Magic is one of my favorite characters, and so is Ian. I like Ian as well. And yeah, I really hope that it continues, because the stories are really good. I love the legends behind it, and the whole big storyline through it, the mystery, and all the different stuff that they added to it. I really hope that it continues for another season or more, but if it doesn't, that's okay too, because I at least enjoyed the ride.
Hello, Leapers, and welcome back to, well, I guess this isn't the Quantum Leap podcast, but these are Quantum Leap podcast peeps on the Quantum Leap Rewatch podcast with Stacie and Dave. We were asked to talk a little bit about Quantum Leap, and that's what me and Brian Green like to do, so we're here doing it. Hey, Brian, how you doing?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing good. I was kind of sad because, like, part of our trip to New York on the train, we went via, North Dakota. Didn't get to see you.
Well, that's not where I live. Keep guessing.
Okay. I'll keep working on it. One of these times I'm gonna figure it out.
It's so
all right.
close.
It's so close. So close. Yet so far. But yeah, traveling on. That's what we're doing. And Brian, let's talk a little bit about the 35th anniversary of Quantum Leap and Al's Place in particular. Many people know you, some might not. Me, first-time listeners meeting you. This is Brian Green. He's awesome. He runs Al's Place, the premier Quantum Leap website, the best Quantum Leap website of all time. I have to say.
Thank you.
And so what made you do it? What inspired you? How do you keep going after all these years? And so much work you put into it. Tell me everything about Al's Place in 5 minutes or less.
I don't know if I can do that, but I'm going to try. Okay, so it started in 2000. I was bored. I had a website. The internet was new. The computers were new. So I played with it. And I liked Quantum Leap.
I did that when the internet came around too. And I'm still doing it. So that's good.
Well, yeah. So yeah, I just made this I had my own personal website. I put a little Quantum Leap section on it. And, search engines picked it up and people started coming to that. And it wasn't just my sister looking at it. So I moved it to, its own server on, whatever it was at the time. But
GeoCities or something?
It was on GeoCities. We actually moved it to, our own URL, quantumleap-alsplace.com.
Yeah. How'd you pick that one?
In 2002. Do what?
How did you pick that one? Was Quantum Leap already taken?
Quantum Leap was already taken. And I knew I wanted Quantum Leap in the title. I know it's kind of long, but yeah, it's
pretty good one.
It's been that way ever since. It's been about 24 years, and it's just built and built and built. A lot of people helped build it. Lots of fans, lots of, even stars of the show, crew, producers, everybody has sent me things over the years, and I just put it out there for everybody. It's been a lot of fun. Keeping it going has been a challenge at times. Back in 2009, I had my son, and so for about 10 years, the show was off. There was no new news really, so there wasn't a lot going on, and it's hard to raise a son when you're doing a website every 5 minutes. But now he's older and I can do a lot more. So thank goodness the timing worked out for the new series, and it's been a lot of fun doing that. I created a whole new subsection of the site, kind of mirroring the original, but a little more tech savvy for the new series, and it's been a lot of fun. On Tuesday, if you're probably watching this on the 35th anniversary. So
happy anniversary!
You will see our new video library for that I've been building over the last couple of months. Had a fan offer to help out with some videos, so there's a lot of new stuff coming. I've categorized just about every interview I could find, including Quantum Leap podcast. So they're all, listed under the name of the actor or the producer or whatever. So you'll be able to see that. And I don't know, it's just been a lot of fun. Thanks to everybody. We got new forums open that work really great. And that also, some of the videos, not to infringe on copyrights, but YouTube sometimes flags things they shouldn't flag. And our new forums will let us post videos just like YouTube without that restriction. So there's going to be a lot of stuff on there that you may not be able to see on YouTube. Not that we're trying to break copyright law, but small clips nobody cares about. So enjoy.
Yeah. I think those are more to promote the show and fandom, and the deeper people can dive, the more they get into the fandom and the more they'll watch the show. So it's just promotion.
Oh yeah, that's all I ever wanted to do.
Yeah, it's never posting full episodes and taking away from anything.
We're not doing anything like that.
No,
so.
we're just the fan community supporting them, I think. That's how I look at it. But algorithms don't understand the human experience.
Exactly. Like, for instance, Justice in the original series, YouTube won't let me put the leap into that on there because it depicts, KKK members. Mm-hmm. But that's not what the episode is really about. It's not promoting the KKK. It's the opposite. But YouTube won't let me put that on there. So it is linked into our forum site in the media section. So you can still play it just like YouTube.
Very cool. Very cool. And I think Stacie also wanted me to talk about a little bit about the podcast and my experience with Quantum Leap
podcast after show. How'd you get started on Quantum Leap podcast?
I think a lot of people know the stories, but if you don't know who I am, I'm Albie. I pretty much made the Quantum Leap podcast. The first host was me and my former partner, Heather. And we did up until, I think, Rebel Without a Clue. And, but I was just, there was nothing out there Quantum Leap podcast related. And I wanted to listen to a Quantum Leap podcast. And I was a fledgling podcaster. And her and I had something under our belt. It was the Terra Nova podcast. And that really hit. Like when we did it, like we were the only ones doing it. So we were able to build up a quick and dirty fan community and everybody wanted to help. And then we kind of transitioned that into Quantum Leap podcast when Terra Nova got canceled and we were looking for something and I wanted Quantum Leap. So, and it has been like one of the best fan online experiences because I just met so many cool friends like you, Brian. Yeah. And you're all the way in Colorado.
There's a C in it. We're
California.
in there.
California.
Ew.
Okay, I'll figure it out. But I met so many friends through Quantum Leap and shared so many different things with different people. And I think most of the friends I have right now, I wouldn't have met if I didn't do the podcast. So the podcast has been like a really good gift. And we get to interview all the people, if you haven't heard of our show, go back and go to the website. I think it's quantumleappodcast.com. And of course, search Quantum Leap Podcast on YouTube and we'll show up. We're the one with the blue hockey puck, representing the new show. And we have interviews with everyone from Scott Bakula to Raymond Lee and everyone in between. We have editors. We have producers, directors, writers, guest stars. We got under 5 line people. I love doing interviews with people that had less than 5 lines in an episode because you talk to them for 2 hours and find out all the dirt and all the skinny that happened on the set that week for that episode. And it really takes you back. And we have great episodes from the classic series. I try to get one guest star at least from each episode. And we even talked to Don Belisario. And of course, all of us, all the time we talk to Deborah because she's such a great supporter of the show and the heart of Quantum Leap. And it's just a fun place to hang out, and it's all inclusive, and I just love doing it. And then Brian, you came aboard pretty much right away when we started the after show. You were one of the first people I reached out to because I really always look up to you and admire you for all the hard work you did on your website. And it's been great having you on the after show, and you're also doing another podcast too, right, with Damon?
Yeah, the Fandom Entanglement Quantum Leap podcast. Started doing that with them. I've known those guys since the early days of Quantum Leap. MJ doing the virtual season, and Damon and Mike met them on the forums. Just been friends for 20 plus years now. So we got together, and he's he had his own podcast. So I joined in with him, and I love doing it with you guys too. And it's been pretty cool. Usually I'm like a behind the scenes type of guy. But it's
well, you got the face. You got the face. You got the voice. So people love you. So I think this might be one of your callings. You have many, but 35 years of Quantum Leap. What is your takeaway reflection? Like I'm trying to struggle to think about like all encompassing 35 years of Quantum Leap.
I don't know how you could say that in another 2 minutes. That's all we got. I don't know. I started watching when I was 13. Watched it from the very beginning. I love the premise. I love the characters and how it solved a lot of problems, social issues, and all that kind of thing. Even at a young age, you could tell what it was doing. And got a new series now, which is even more inclusive of just everybody. They even go so far as to make crew members and cast and everything certain, religions or ethnicities or whatever what have you. So that's pretty cool. Even the music in some of them is definitely deliberate to include all different ranges of things. So it's pretty cool. 35 years of that, I can go for another.
I agree. All that stuff and more. Started watching it when I was a kid when it first came on, and have been a fan ever since. And I just loved it. I love Scott. I love Dean. I love the new show. I love everything about it. I love learning moral lessons. I love learning about what it's like to walk a mile in someone else's shoes. And I think the new show really exemplifies that. And I'm a big fan of all of the Quantum Leaps. And got to meet Scott Bakula. So now I join that small club of all you guys that met Scott before.
Yes.
So now I met Scott. So that was one of the highlights of my life. And the fact that my daughter Serenity was there with me made it even better. So Scott and Serenity got to talk about their favorite episodes. And there she is. And they were talking about Catch a Falling Star. So that was very cool.
Great.
Scott was very kind and nice and giving, and it just another example of how awesome Quantum Leap is. So for Brian Green and Albie, we want to say happy 35th anniversary to Quantum Leap.
35th.
And check us out on the quantumleappodcast.com. Al's Place - what is it?
quantumleap-alsplace.com.
Yeah, it's just one of my favorites. I click on my favorites, so I don't type it in every time. So yeah, check that out. Also, go to the forums, meet people. So many Quantum Leap fans there. It's a great place to talk, chat, and just learn about Quantum Leap. I love it. And thank you, Stacie and Dave, for having us on. And we just appreciate the opportunity to say hi and help celebrate Quantum Leap with everybody. So for the Quantum Leap podcast and Quantum Leap podcast after show, I'm Albie.
I'm Serenity.
And I'm Brian.
And check us out. We're in all the places. Link down below. Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
Trying to explain what Quantum Leap means to me is like trying to explain what breathing means to me. Quantum Leap wasn't the first time travel story that I loved, but it was the show that really locked in my love for the genre. I'm not joking when I say I think in time travel terms. I think in non-linear narrative storytelling terms, in what I do creatively, in just how I look at and how I approach life in a strange way, in my mental health journey as a human being, as a parent. It's just mentally how I approach things. There's a reason why my platform is called Dad to the Future. And beyond simply time travel as a storytelling device, there's something very specific about Quantum Leap that it took me over 20 years to realize why I identified with it so much. In almost every episode of the classic series, you have Sam, someone who is a literal genius. They have, 6 degrees. They speak so many languages. They are a rock star in their own world. But every single episode, Sam gets thrown into a situation where he makes a fool out of himself. He embarrasses himself. But ultimately, he saves the day in part by tapping in to his values and tapping into who he really is. I grew up as a misfit, constantly picked on, teased, and later in life come to realize a lot of that it comes from being neurodivergent, ADHD with a little autism sprinkles on top, basically. So very often out in public, socially, I always felt frustrated that I could not tap into the person who I knew I was up here inside my head, or who I was at home or around the friends and family that I trusted the most. And though I know the creators never intended it, Sam Beckett's story, episode after episode, was a metaphor for that. And it's something that I needed to see, the trying, the failing, but ultimately succeeding and persevering in being who you needed to be, being who you were, being who you truly are, and that being enough. And I have been lucky to meet and forge relationships with other folks in the fandom over the last few years. And while I don't know your all's story on a deep level, just interacting with you on social media, I get the sense that our stories have a lot of overlap. And I really don't have a witty way to end this. You know, when recording this right now, we don't know if we're going to get a third season of the new show or not. And if we don't, I just hope that the fandom still finds a way to keep coming together online and sharing our love for the show and the love for the time travel genre in general.
Amada Anderson and Damon Sugamelli got engaged this past summer and didn't initially want to get married until later this year. But when they realized a leap day was approaching, they, leaped at the chance to tie the knot on February 29th.
We were talking to our parents, and everybody was like, it's too soon to get people to fly over there, and it's too cold.
And it's a Monday.
So we were like, well, we still want the dates.
Part of the reason is they're a bit obsessed with time. The time travel show Quantum Leap brought them together.
He awoke to find himself in the past.
When they have a bigger, more formal wedding later this year, time travel will be its theme.
Like, wouldn't it be perfect since Quantum Leap, the TV show, brought us together, and then we got married on Leap Day, because it's Quantum Leap.
Yeah, and it's a special day.
It's every 4 years.
And we'll do something special.
And then we realized, as we looked at the calendar, like, wait, it's next year. And I was like, wait, it's too early to tell everybody to try to get everybody together, so we're actually having 2 weddings. We did it officially today so we could have the date. And then in October 29th, we're going to have a big time travel themed wedding.
So everybody would here to kind of wait forward for us to that day.
Yes.
And you started dating 5 years ago?
Yes.
And you bonded over the relationship blossomed, in part because of Quantum Leap, for the time that you found the fan letters.
Oh, I used to write love letters. Scott Bakula was my first love. I was like 9. I was writing fan fiction to Scott Bakula. I went to the public library, I found his address in California, and I wrote to both of them, and he sent me a postcard. I was like, let's go and stay in my house. And then when I was comparing the love letters to him, he goes, well, I wrote fan fiction for the show. And I was a writer, and I'm an actress and a singer, so I was like, creative, oh my gosh, this is so cool.
Yeah, I'm a writer, she's the actress.
Hey, this is John Irons, host of Captain Gameshow and the occasional guest on the Quantum Leap After Show with Albie. Wishing Quantum Leap a happy 35th anniversary. Thank you to the creators of the show, old and new, for reminding us that the world could always be a little bit better place, and that is up to us to do our part to make it that way.
Hi, I'm John. Quantum Leap will always and forever be my favorite show. I've loved it since I was conscious. I don't remember a time without it, actually. My dad taped episodes when I was young, and I have stacks and stacks of old VHSs that I just can't get rid of. Despite the fact that I have the show on DVD, I have the show on Blu-ray, it's streaming everywhere, and of course this new revival is excellent. Take a look at my car. I've got 2 bumper stickers from the show. I've got a couple of shirts, and even last year I dressed as Al for Phoenix Comic-Con. So Quantum Leap yesterday, Quantum Leap today, Quantum Leap forever. Leap on, leapers.
And we are back. I hope you enjoyed that presentation. I certainly did.
Yeah.
I mean, I created it, so I'm a little biased, but...
And again, if you are listening on a podcast platform, you're going to want to head over to YouTube where that extra video is included.
I'd like to thank everybody that contributed to that. There'll be a few contributions that I did not mention, probably because they came late, but contributions were from Deborah Pratt, of course, my Canadian voice actress crush in Carla Mack, Albie and Brian Green from the Quantum Leap podcast, John Irons, also from the Quantum Leap podcast, Dennis from Dad to the Future podcast. We saw a news clip of Damon and Amanda's wedding. Damon, of course, being the co-host of the Fandom Entanglement podcast, along with Mike Bach and MJ Cogburn. MJ wanted to record something, but unfortunately she was recovering from surgery and was not in the best place to do so. Best wishes on a speedy recovery for her. Damon's wife, Amanda, is an honorary co-host on Fandom Entanglement and owner of New York Broadway tours, as well as Winter Haven food tours. And she's also an actress for the Murder Mystery Company in Florida. So once again, thank you to everybody who contributed to this special. It was very much appreciated. Now, before we get back into this episode, there's some things that I want to say about what Deborah Pratt said in her video. And I noticed a lot of things that she said in her interview, but what was interesting to me is basically I was able to get closure from her reasoning behind why she didn't bring Sam home.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if Sam had come home, would we still be talking about this series 35 years later?
And the answer is maybe not.
Yeah, it's quite possible that if she had concluded the story and it just ended, that we might not still be talking about this series, even though it's still an excellent series either way. But
right. And definitely make sure you head over to warrior1world.com and check out Deborah's latest project, which is the graphic novel Warrior 1, which is a companion to her Vision Quest novel series. And Warrior 1 follows the travels of Jeddah A on a fantastic futuristic adventure.
And feel free to check out any of those podcast platforms that contributed to our video.
Yes, we will try to remember to put those links down in our video description.
All right,
so we're going to get right back into Genesis, and we are going to head into part 2.
Yes, and the episode begins with Sam admiring the X2. Al appears and ends up explaining string theory to Sam.
And this is specifically Sam's string theory.
Yes.
About time travel, which is a little bit different from real life string theory, which is a lot more complicated.
Right.
But Sam's string theory is that one end of a piece of string represents your birth, the other your death. And if you tie the ends together, your life becomes a loop. If you ball that loop, the days of your life touch each other out of sequence. And leaping from one point on the string to another would leap you through time. Project Quantum Leap.
Yeah, let's do it.
Which, of course, we completely abandoned that concept in the revival because you don't leap within your own lifetime.
Right.
But let's forget about that.
Yes. Also, I think quantum leaping is just very different in the new series in a way that they don't really acknowledge that much.
Yeah, in a way that's very different from the way Deborah explained it, which was the conception behind the series.
Yes, and that was pretty interesting in itself.
How one person leaps in and you have to displace the other person.
I want to find that book that she was talking about.
The Stephen Hawking book?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But you know what? Even listening to her talk about that, and how that was the concept behind the series, it made me remember where we land in Mirror Image.
Yes.
When that doesn't happen. Where Sam leaps somewhere and he is an extra person leaping into a room that wasn't there before.
Right.
So they break that own rule by the time this series ended already.
Well, maybe he was trading places with a quark and not an entire person. All right. So
Sam's annoyed that Al's walking through things.
Yes. He again explains to him being a hologram. Sam remembers that he's in the imaging chamber, but Al won't tell him the year.
Yeah, he remembers they're in a cavern somewhere. Yeah. Al does tell him New Mexico, but won't tell him the year. I don't know if they hadn't established yet exactly when this takes place, but by process of, other times dates are mentioned throughout the series. This is about 1995 now.
Yeah, like I mentioned that when I did the original Genesis video that I was under the impression that it was always 1999, which is the dates that appear later in the series. Right. But a lot of people pointed out to me that it's actually not 1999 when the series begins. It is around 1995 when Sam starts leaping, which makes it even crazier that the future looks the way it does. Yeah. Like, because this is only 6 years.
Right. That far future, 6 years from when this was airing.
Yep.
And we got, Ziggy has a theory that God or fate or something.
Yes.
Our first reference that kind of sounds sort of towards our GFTW that we end up using. This, whatever this is, something grabbed Sam when he leaped in order to put something right that went wrong in history. And Al doesn't like this theory. He thinks that's total hooey.
But Tom Stratton apparently died in the original history. And Sam doesn't like this theory any, that he's basically there to
break Mach 3 and live.
Yes. And the other theory that Al has is that apparently you have to be at ground zero when an explosion goes off, a nuclear explosion.
And there's only a 52% chance that would even work to bring him home.
Mm-hmm. And otherwise, I think you'd just be vaporized if you didn't leap.
Yeah, sounds like a pretty bad idea to try.
Al suggests to do nothing, to just stay around as Tom Stratton. His wife and son, we're going to lose him on Monday anyway. And Tom,
he could have a nice life here, right?
Yeah, and Tom could just continue on in the future. I'm sure he could find like some kind of piloting program that he can get into. Al suggests that he could also be Sam's co-pilot, and that he could help Sam break Mach 3.
Right, because Al tells us he is an ex-astronaut.
Ah,
very convenient.
Yes. And that's always the way with Al. It's always a convenient thing.
Yeah, he's done everything in his life. We'll start very high that he was a pilot, astronaut.
Yeah.
And he tells Sam the hardest part is takeoff and landing. The middle is a piece of cake.
Right.
And he doesn't have to worry about takeoff because the drop plane does that.
Yep.
So it's just the landing he has to worry about.
Well, I'm pretty sure that's a pretty serious thing.
That's a pretty serious thing. And Al says, yeah, you couldn't land the X2 even with my help. That's not going to happen.
So basically,
but
Mach 3
you don't have to.
Right.
Let the plane crash, eject, just like we saw Lamont do yesterday, and you'll be fine.
Right.
You'll float to the ground, and the minute you touch down, you're going to leap home.
Okay.
In theory.
If the plane explodes before he manages to eject,
then he dies.
Yes.
But it's probably better odds than ground zero during an atomic detonation.
I would imagine so, and plus that would probably be bad for the host that Sam is left into.
Well, he's going to die anyways, right?
Fair, but I think that might be a slightly... I don't know. I mean, if you're at ground zero, you're basically, vaporized instantly, so that might not be too bad. So Sam, at night, he's emotionally contemplating the phone.
Yeah, because he's still trying to figure out how he can contact his family, but he doesn't remember their names. He's sitting in his underwear again.
Mm-hmm. He seems to like doing that. Peggy finds him and thinks he's worried about not breaking Mach 3. And, I mean, I guess that's sort of true.
Yeah.
He's also worried about dying and all that. And,
right.
He's got some other things on his mind. She makes him promise something without telling her what he is promising.
And he says she'll tell him tomorrow night what he promised.
Mm-hmm. And we have more gossiping wives in a scene briefly.
Yeah, the women are talking about Marilyn Monroe, who's in the paper having just recently married Arthur Miller.
Ah, that's right. I forgot about that. I mean, I wasn't present for that, but I forgot that she was married to Arthur Miller.
Yeah, that's what they were reading about in the paper.
Okay.
And they hear the plane take off.
Yep. Bird Dog starts singing in the plane. Weird Ernie. Wow, Weird Al. Weird Al is someone completely
different. He's
different.
singing Yellow Rose of Texas. He's not singing Weird Al, which is where that sentence sounded like you were saying.
So, yeah, basically, Weird Ernie threatens him to get off the channel. And the previous pilot tells Sam that just before he went kablooey, he smelled coffee. All right, now, there's kind of a missing subplot here. I think this was probably cut for time. But we actually see Sam give Dr. Berger a questionnaire.
I realized it much later in the episode, and I put my note, where is the memory test questionnaire scenes?
I think it's just before they get onto the...
I did some extensive research to figure out what... I remember these scenes.
Right, yeah.
They were cut when this was made into a 2-part episode.
Right, yeah.
So if you find the original movie-length episode, which I think is on some of the DVD versions,
yes,
it includes those extra scenes. Which I did not find to prep for this. But if my memory serves, it was a bunch of questions, and Sam gave truthful answers, and they were really funny.
Right.
Because he was giving his real life memories from the future.
Right.
And then, the team's reading the answers and just assume that the guys are totally messing with them.
Right.
Which everybody is, except for Sam.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So the previous pilot, Lamont, tells Sam that just before he went kablooey, he smelled coffee, which is not quite accurate. He's remembering things a little bit wrong.
Right.
But Sam is put into the X2. There's no sign of Al, and Sam is mentally calling for him.
Yeah. So they it's at 25,000 feet, which is when they drop, and Sam screams, Albert!
Yeah, so he's basically panicking, and that's when Al finally appears and tells him to fire off Rocket 1 and 2 and then match his movements. And Al apparently was at the Lakers game, the playoffs, when he met Martha. So this is like 3 women in this episode.
Yeah, there's a couple more references to women too that we, glossed past. But yeah, already in one episode he's named many women.
So we get to Mach.
But we don't know at this point that he actually has a girlfriend. We haven't established that.
So we get to hit Mach 1, then Mach 2. The warning light goes off. They realize that the coffee thing was actually the fuel boiling.
Right, it's boiling. He says he didn't smell coffee, he heard it. Because that's the same sound that a percolator... say the word for me.
I can't.
Percolator.
Percolator,
there we go. Whoa.
And then Sam actually hits Mach 3. Sam ejects.
Meanwhile, Al's screaming at him to shut it down.
Right.
Abort. Turn the rockets off. But Sam persists because he's so close to Mach 3. He doesn't turn the rockets off. As soon as the needle hits Mach 3, he knows he broke the record. He ejects, and the plane crashes to the ground. Sam lands on his parachute, and then Sam realizes he didn't leap.
Yes.
And he's very angry that he is still here.
So while he's in a car, he's being checked out by Dr. Berger.
Dr. Berger has him up there in an ambulance, and they're going to a hospital. And this is the first time we get a scene where Sam is talking to both somebody in the room and Al at the same time.
Yep.
So he's having one set of lines, but they apply to both of the other characters in some fashion, and they're both responding and having it in a whole conversation.
Right.
Which is done, periodically throughout this series. It's done a lot more frequently in the Revival series.
Yes.
But it's beautiful whenever they manage to pull this off, and we're having 2 conversations happening once. That has to be so hard to film.
Oh, I'm sure it
For
is.
the 2 of the actors to pretend like they can't hear half of the conversation and talk over each other.
Yes.
Like, that's got to be crazy to film like that.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. I can't imagine.
But it's beautiful symmetry.
Like, I'm too easily distracted, so I would not be able to do a scene like that.
Yeah.
So Sam ends up going to the hospital. Basically, Al ends up taking off, saying...
And Al says, well, I don't know, maybe you'll leap home when you're sleeping.
Right.
Right, because you leaped in while you were sleeping.
Yeah, maybe.
Which doesn't happen often. I think the only other time Sam leaped in sleeping was A Leap for Lisa, when he leaped into Al and he was dreaming. The only time he ever was dreaming. But yeah, it definitely isn't, you have to be sleeping to leap. Although that's, reminds me of Dean Stockwell in The Langoliers. You have to be asleep in that movie.
Yes, okay. So Sam goes to the hospital where Peggy happens to be.
Yeah, so Sam and Dr. Berger are walking through the hospital, and Mikey's there with the wives. They kind of assume that they're there for him.
Right.
And he's like, hey, I'm okay. But we find out that Peg went into premature labor when she heard the crash. And we didn't mention it, but when he hit Mach 3 and we had that biggest sonic boom ever, her coffee pot exploded on the stove. And that's when she must have panicked and went into labor.
Gotcha. Sam ends up hugging Peggy in the room that she's in, and she's happy that he kept his promise. And Sam ends up talking... Oh, yeah. First, he ends up doing breathing exercises.
Yeah,
with her.
So he has her doing Lamaze before it's invented.
Yes, it's
and
not a
she's
thing
like,
in the 1950s.
She says, how do you know how to do that? And he's like, oh, I learned it in pre-med.
Right. I'm sorry, you were Dr. when exactly? So the doctors think it's...
Dr. Berger calls Tom aside and introduces Dr. Blaustein to her. So this is Peg's doctor at the hospital. And he's played by James F. Dean. And you know what? I don't think we ever said Captain Burdell, so let me put that here. He's played by John Allen Nelson. And he's actually, his most recent credits in an episode of Virgin River.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Adjacent to our Sullivan's Crossing conversations.
Okay. That's interesting. I'm going to, check out that series just to see him. See what he looks like now. I'm sure it's pretty old. But the doctors thinks it's bad news with the baby being 9 months premature.
9 weeks.
9 weeks.
9 months premature would mean not existent.
Right. Yeah. Basically, a cell fell out of her body.
Yeah, that happens once a month.
Yes.
It's called ovulation.
Well, thank you for the education. But so they suggest delivering the baby and then flying the baby to LA. And Sam doesn't think the baby will have a chance, but the doctors are like, yes, but Peggy will.
Right. They can't move Peg right now.
Right.
It's too dangerous for her.
Sam asks, how far apart are the contractions? And he's given the answer, which
contractions just started. She's only 2 centimeters dilated. Yes. So Sam says, so it's early enough to stop it. But the doctor says, once labor starts, you can't stop it.
Right.
Because, medicine wasn't great in 1956.
Right. But the doctors don't know what Sam is talking about because what he's talking about we just said that. Okay, so...
Yeah, he says, of course, you can start her on a I'm going to try to say this, beta sympathomimetic.
That sounds right.
Something like that.
Yes.
And then Sam realizes that didn't come out until the late 70s. And Berger starts getting upset with him.
Yes.
He says, listen, I'm willing to let this go because you've been through a lot today, but you guys have to drop this bit, right? Mm-hmm. And this is when he mentions Sam says the answers are all true. And Dr. Berger's holding the test. And this is the only reference to, it's like, oh, wait a minute. That's when I remembered, like, you cut that whole bit out. Why didn't they cut it out right here? I don't know. But they're referencing this test, which we didn't actually see happen.
Right. So eventually Sam ends up suggesting getting her drunk.
Yeah, putting a 5% solution of alcohol administered through the IV will get her instantly drunk, and it's going to stop the contractions.
That's good to know. I never knew that was a thing.
I mean, it's apparently a very dangerous thing, but back then it was their best option.
Right, okay. So Peggy, next time we see her, it's worked. And
she's very drunk.
Yes, she's singing Que Sera, Sera, a very beautiful rendition of the song. Not quite creepy like in From,
yes,
of course.
Yes.
So Sam goes to the window. Oh, yeah. And wow, is that really it?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, he goes to the window and he gives Burdell and Mikey a thumbs up, letting them know that Peg is okay. And Mikey throws a baseball to Sam.
And that's when Sam leaps.
But no leap effect, like you already mentioned.
No leap effect. And he ends up in a baseball game playing a guy named Fox.
Yeah.
And the team is the Bombers. It's the bottom of the 9th. It's the coaches and Fox last game, though we're not told that yet. And they are in last place.
Yeah, so I felt like it was a really cool transition. Mm-hmm. We never get a transition like that again.
Right.
So Mikey throws the ball to Sam. Sam catches the ball that Mikey threw, except now he's a catcher in this baseball game.
Yes.
So it was a cool transition, but they completely dropped that in exchange for we're just going to randomly leap you and have a leap effect.
And I like the leap effect.
Yeah, we like the leap effect.
Yeah.
But it would have been cool if they had fun transitions. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Actually, you know what? The other time that I feel like the transition matched was the leap home between part 1 and 2.
Oh, yeah.
With Sam screaming to Tom, and it carries through to his leap.
Yeah.
So that's another time where we have a cool transition like that.
All right.
Okay, so like you said, he's in Waco, Texas. It's summer 1968. This is one of the only times that we're not told the date of a leap in the original series.
Right.
We're told it's 1968. We know it's summer. We know it's the last game of the season, but we don't have a date.
So he's walking in the dugout. His dog realizes that it's not Sam, and he basically tries to intimidate the dog by, hissing and growling and trying to show him who's boss. But the dog starts getting really...
it was this really kind of actually funny if you watch it. Like, this doesn't look like a mean dog.
No.
But they're trying to present this as being this mean, scary dog.
Right.
It was really funny to watch that.
And eventually the dog ends up cowering for no reason. I guess losing the
staring
battle for
match.
domination.
Yeah.
Al ends up scaring him. They go down to the locker room, and I have to mention the fact that there's a big timing problem in this episode. Sam has so much time to do all these things before he goes up to bat that I don't think he would have had time to actually have, given the fact that he was up to bat pretty soon.
Right. Yeah, the coach was even like, you need to hurry.
Right.
The coach is played here by Lee Deborah Deborah. He was in 3 episodes of Magnum PI. See, I told you there's a lot of like Magnum and Jag people in this episode. And Tim Fox's mirror image, which we're going to see in just a second.
Who is not an attractive man,
He's played by Ken Martin. And that's one of the most famous mirror images because it's used in like the opening of the series.
Yes.
Throughout.
Yep, throughout the entire series. So they go to the locker room. Sam looks at himself in the mirror.
He wants to know how Al got there so fast.
Yeah.
Because, remember, he just like leaped catching a baseball. It was instantaneous for him. But Al says it's been a week since he leaped out of 56. Very interesting to note there.
Yes. So we don't really get an idea of how much time passes at the project when Sam is leaping.
Right.
But
it feels like it could be any various amount of time based on this.
Yeah.
Maybe 3 years even.
Maybe. Perhaps. And I note that Al never gives up on him. He doesn't, find someone else to be a hologram to. Anyway, moving along. Al reveals that Ziggy blew it. Tom Stratton died in the original timeline, but his wife also went into premature labor, and the baby died. And now that's changed, and the kid's name is named Samantha, which is important because it does come up in the new series.
Yeah, see the 2022 Quantum Leap, Season 1, Episode 2, Atlantis.
Yes.
For more on that storyline.
Yep. Ziggy, and it's very subtle there. We don't really get any backstory there other than like the name.
It's a very Easter egg moment. Yep. Yeah. They don't point it out in series.
So Ziggy won't say what Sam is there to do. Ziggy is depressed, has a big ego. And Al reveals that Quantum Leap is actually Sam's project, and that he holds 6 doctorates to go along with his medical.
Right, medicine's just one of them, but his real special gift is quantum physics. Time magazine even called him the next Einstein.
Ooh, if there's one guy who can figure out how to get him home, it would be Sam. And Sam laments that he can't even remember his name. Al sighs and tells him it's Beckett. Sam uses this info to go call his dad, which I'm pretty sure Al knew he was going to do.
Yeah, so we see the games continuing. Yeah. It's moving forward. We're getting announcements from the sportscaster, who's played by Doug Cox. And like you said, Sam's just hanging out in the locker room, doing his own thing.
So he initially screws up this phone call with his dad by calling him dad. And this, sets off alarm bells with his father. He's like, hey, who the heck are you?
Yeah.
And Sam ends up pretending to be one of his brother's son.
Okay, so he says he's a Beckett.
Yep.
And that his father, meaning Sam's fake identity's father, and John's father are related.
Yes.
They're brothers.
Yes.
I had to literally write down a family tree to figure this out.
Did you do like a flowchart?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Because
I was joking.
I mean, okay, so I'm the family genealogist. I'm used to working with family trees, so that's where my mind went.
Yeah.
Because they made this so confusing. Because Sam's dad's name is John.
Yeah.
The guy we're talking about's name is John. Why didn't they pick a different name?
I don't know.
Okay, so I broke it down. Sam's grandpa, okay. John's dad, is the brother of John that moved to Australia.
Okay.
So Dad John's Uncle John.
Okay.
Is the person who Sam's saying is his father.
Ah.
So Sam is saying that he is his dad's first cousin, which would make him his own first cousin once removed.
Interesting.
Very more complicated than it needed to be.
Yeah.
He could have just said, I'm your cousin. But he's like, I'm related. My dad and your dad are related. They're brothers.
Right.
It was very complicated, especially again that 2 people in this conversation have the same name.
Yeah. I mean, I still don't get any of that.
Although, I don't think in this scene we were told that Dad's name is John Beckett.
No, we don't know that yet, I don't think.
We just know that his uncle's name is John. I wonder if they fumbled that later when they were remembering.
Fumbled it. That's an interesting new word. I like it. Yeah, so that could have just been a mistake, or maybe they just... I don't know.
So it turns out that Uncle John moved to Australia when John was just a kid.
Okay.
And so he doesn't really know him. So he doesn't know anything about, like, oh, did he have a kid? Who is this? Like, I'm not sure the age is here. It seems a little weird because Sam's talking about not being able to come home for Thanksgiving, but kind of theoretically he should be closer to his dad's age in this comparison.
Yeah.
But John says, he knows that Sam's dad will understand. And he says that even if you can't make it all the way to Australia for the holidays, he's welcome to come visit them in Indiana anytime, whether now, Thanksgiving or not.
What's interesting from this point on, anytime that we see
John Beckett.
Yeah, John Beckett, Sam's father, he's played by Bakula.
Right.
Whereas in this episode, he is very much not.
No, in this episode, he is played by Newell Anderson. Newell Alexander.
Yep.
And I noticed he had a huge IMDb, lots of voice work I saw on his.
Okay. And, when this conversation ends, and this is a very emotional conversation, Sam ends up saying that he loves his dad, though not so that his dad can hear it. It's very reminiscent of it wouldn't be the pilot episode. It was actually the new series. It was originally supposed to be the pilot.
Right, episode 6 of the revival.
Yeah.
What a disaster.
Yeah, and what a disaster.
Which was, that leap was originally scheduled to be the pilot. So they had plans of putting a parallel scene of the leaper calling their parent.
Yeah, in this case, it was Ben's mother.
Has since died.
Yeah.
And reconnecting with them. They did put a parallel scene in their pilot, but then it became not the pilot, so it just comes a little later in the season.
So after the phone call ends, we see his dad's side of the conversation.
Right.
And we see a younger Sam, and he talks to him about the possibility of this person coming over for Thanksgiving, which we know is never going to happen.
Well, he does make it home for Thanksgiving, but not that year. Yeah. A couple years later.
And his voice is overdubbed by Bakula himself.
Right. Scott Bakula is voicing the boy, which was kind of weird.
It was. I don't understand. Like, they did that with Al in a Leap for Lisa, and it's like, why are you giving, like, a teenager a 50-year-old smoker's voice?
Right.
Like, why are you doing that?
But young Sam is played by Adam Alfonso, and he also provides the mirror image for Sam in the leap home.
Right. And I think he also reprises the character, sort of, in Shock Theater, because we briefly
see kind of that same, we see a leap home moment in there.
So Sam is happier now, and he says that quantum leaping might not be such a bad gig after all. Think of all the people that he can help before he's done. He returns to the game. He definitely has a very different attitude going on. He returns to Al, who is, he thanks, and Al's very emotional.
Yeah, and Al knows you're like this. You're gonna lose this game. Go out there, and this is Fox's last time. The coach is like, hey, this is my last time too. I don't want to go out in the cellar. But Sam says, hey, maybe I'm actually here to win this one. Al thinks that's funny.
Right. Yeah, he's like, I'm not this Fox character. And Al basically laughs and says, well, you're not Roy Hobbs either. I think that's a baseball player.
I would assume so.
I didn't actually look him up.
Sports.
Yes. The coach, we already said that.
So the crowd is cheering for Foxy, the most prominent person in the crowd. He's credited as Old Man. He's played by Patrick Crenshaw. We hear him shouting for Foxy, and Sam goes up to bat.
And we have strike one, and then there's strike two, very quick. Oh yeah, after the first strike, the coach says to the team, well, at least there's someone out there who can follow orders. Apparently, not swinging at first pitches or something along those lines.
Right. But then he gets a second strike, and now the coach is worried.
Yeah.
On the third pitch, Sam swings and still misses.
Right. And it's like this big dramatic moment. You think he's going to hit the ball and hit a home run or something like that. But no, he completely misses. But the catcher drops the ball. And we have dramatic slow motion as Sam starts to run the bases.
Yeah, and we can see Al screaming at him, but the vocals are turned off, so we can't hear it. But he's screaming at Sam to run, and he runs through the bases. Meanwhile, this other team drops the ball like numerous times trying to end this play.
Yeah, I think all these people are going to be released at the end of this game because this is just pretty bad. Definitely not very good fielding skills there. So he ends up sliding into home, and once you know it, he's safe. The game is won.
And the teammates come surrounding him, and they're so happy.
Pigpiling him, and then Sam leaps into a classroom, and he's in the episode Starcross.
Yes.
Which, maybe we'll eventually cover that together.
It's another, kind of important story element episode. I just want to mention the other guest stars that are in this leap. Real quick, we had characters named Pepper, played by Kevin Johnson. Barnes was played by David Dawson. Matt was played by Mike Greenwood. Clyde was played by Dave Dunsing. The Batboy was played by Brent Chalum. And the umpire was played by Hank Robinson.
Oh, okay.
And I want to talk about that actor for just a moment.
Yes.
He also plays the umpire in Play Ball.
Oh, okay.
Which is the other baseball episode where we get to have a full episode about a baseball leap, which is actually the next episode we're going to be covering in our playthrough where we're at chronologically.
Yes, we just did 4-1, so Play Ball is next.
Yeah. So I found it interesting, I knew that fact already, that he plays the umpire in both. I looked up his IMDb. He has 153 acting credits.
That's pretty impressive.
But I noticed that, dozens of those credits are as umpire.
Okay. Was he an umpire himself at one
point?
So
I didn't get any further than this, but I found that very intriguing. Was he an actual umpire?
I mean, it would make sense.
Or is this a really very specific typecast?
I would think...
you're at 100... It's not like he's in a dozen things. 153 credits.
And they're all umpires?
They're not all umpires, but lots and lots and lots and lots of them are umpires. So in all kinds of TV series, movies, he's played umpires.
Interesting. Well, I would guess that has to mean something, that he has some involvement with the game, probably as an umpire.
Yeah, is this supposed to be a cameo that people are supposed to know who he is?
Possibly.
I was just really confused. I'm looking at it as umpire, umpire, umpire. And I was like, oh, okay. So it's not just Quantum Leap.
What's the guy's name?
Hank Robinson.
Hank Robinson. I'm not really familiar with the name, but when we get off, I'll definitely check him out.
Yeah, so I was confused, so that's worth looking at. And if anybody knows that story, feel free to share it with us.
All right. Well, that is the episode. Not a great first episode.
It's not a great first episode, but it is a very classic episode of the series, and it is on the must-watch list. If you're going to check out Quantum Leap, you have to check out this episode, just because it's where we, again, lay out everything. Now, the second leap, the baseball leap, take it or leave it.
Yeah.
I feel like it's doing a whole second leap feels a little silly.
It's only there to give Sam that moment to talk to his father.
It's there so he can call his dad.
Yeah.
But other than that, it just feels kind of weird that we're doing this whole other leap and you're here to win the game.
Right. Well,
instead of that professional ball player.
It was, you would figure that the professional ball player would do better. But I mean, that's true of most of Sam's leaps.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's well, why is Sam more qualified to do this than the person who was actually there?
Yeah, just because he knows the original history.
But as Deborah Pratt mentioned, Scott Bakula had told her that at one point he was playing baseball, that he was very athletic, and so they borrowed things from Scott Bakula's life, basically, and his skill set. So that's probably why that was in the episode, is because, maybe Scott Bakula had played some baseball in his time.
Right.
So, yeah.
So, yes, that's our introduction to both Sam and Al and to how Quantum Leap works. We got the names here, or we actually met Gushy.
Yes.
We get the name Ziggy, and we'll learn a little bit about Ziggy. I want to mention the hand link in this episode.
It's the old boring drab
It's actually the only time they use this hand link. In the next episode, they changed it.
Okay.
So in this episode, it's translucent.
Oh, yeah.
In the next episode, it's black. It looks like a pocket calculator. But in this version, it's kind of like a smoky translucent, so you can see through it. And I read that they never used this one again after the pilot. So they did, they went to the next one, which was just the black one. And then it's not until season 3 that we get the gummy bear hand link.
Yes. And I believe that was introduced it was supposed to be introduced in The Great Spontini.
Yes.
I said that name right?
You did.
Okay. And it actually showed up for the first time, I believe, in Boogeyman.
Correct.
That's because those episodes aired out of order. But yeah, so yeah, do we have anything else to say about this episode? We got through this way quicker than I thought we would.
I know. Look how fast we went through the second half.
Yeah.
Because not a lot happens. It was dramatic, slow. Here's looking at airplanes.
Yeah.
But not a lot to talk through.
Right.
Really. He broke Mach 3.
Yeah.
He didn't leap.
Yeah.
Peg goes into labor. He saves her, and then he makes a phone call to his dad instead of playing baseball.
Right.
That's pretty much it.
Which, like I said, there's a huge timing problem in that whole thing, because there's no way that he would have had time to just do all that before he was up to bat.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, whatever. It was a great scene between the two of them, obviously. But yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, are we doing play ball next time?
Sometime soon we're going to do play ball. Let's not commit to dates right now because all of the schedules are a little wonky right now.
Right.
But our next Quantum Leap episode that we cover will be play ball as we continue through where we were with our straight play of the episodes as we go through season 4. And we do plan on coming back and hitting some of these earlier episodes together eventually.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be all of them, and it's not going to be in any type of schedule.
It's going to be definitely random.
It'll be when it comes, it comes.
Right. When we feel like it. Yeah.
If this happens to be your first time with us today, welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us and for sticking through this whole 2-hour podcast. Check out our other playlists. So, of course, we cover original series Quantum Leap. We have covered all 31 episodes of the revival, and we are hopeful that there will be a third season to discuss that series. We also cover other shows besides Quantum Leap. We cover a show called From, which airs on MGM+, and it is a horror puzzle box series. It's super fun. It's kind of in the vein of Lost. So if you liked that show, I definitely recommend checking out From, and then check out our full playlist discussing that series. And then we also diverge a little bit, and we cover a romantic dramedy,
I guess that's a good term for it.
Called Sullivan's Crossing, which we actually started covering that show because it has a couple crossover actors from the series From that we cover.
Yeah.
And actually, we've interviewed both of those actors now.
Yep.
Reed Price and Bob Mann are in both of those shows. So we started covering Sullivan's Crossing, which airs in Canada on CTV, in the U.S. on the CW. We're patiently awaiting season 2, which is starting hopefully soon-ish. And then we also started covering a sitcom on NBC, which just finished its... Actually, it's finishing tonight.
Right. When this airs.
It's season 1 finale, and that show is called Extended Family. And again, we don't know if that series is going to get another season. But if you're looking for a sitcom, check out Extended Family on NBC Peacock. And it stars an amazing cast.
John Cryer, Donald Faison, Vince Sweeney, Sophia Kapana.
And Abigail Spencer.
And
who
Lenny
fans
Clark,
of Quantum Leap.
Yep.
A lot of fans of Quantum Leap are probably also fans of the series Timeless. Abigail Spencer from Timeless is in Extended Family. She plays the mom. So awesome show to check out if you're looking for something a little lighter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. So do we have anything else to say about this episode?
I'm glad we talked about it.
Yes.
Let us know what you think about Genesis. And all of your feedback will be looked at, and we will shout you out in our next episode, which again will be Play Ball.
Yes. And happy 35th anniversary to Quantum Leap. It's definitely been an amazing 35 years. Maybe not necessarily about my life, but the series itself, it's been fun. Definitely having that around to watch and rewatch, and the new series and all that, and hopefully we get that series that Deborah Pratt wants to do with Sammy Joe and bringing Sam home. But yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, we have high hopes for this franchise to keep growing.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like it's in a better place to possibly do that than it, has been for most of the last 30 years.
Right. Yes. It's relevant again as long as the new series doesn't get canceled.
Yeah.
That's still up in the air whether it's going to get renewed or not.
Yeah, so make sure you write to NBC and let them know you want to see season 3 of Quantum Leap, the revival series. And keep coming back to Korman Productions for lots of great content that we're going to continue to bring you one way or the other.
All right. Thank you for everybody that contributed to this week's podcast. The new 35-year anniversary celebration that we did here. And Stacie can be reached at?
I can reach on Twitter, X, Instagram, and Threads, and the Owl's Place forums at TVN Coupon Talk.
If you like this video and want to support the channel, there are a number of ways to do so. You can join one of my Korman Productions Facebook pages. You can buy something from the Korman Productions store on Zazzle. You can buy me a coffee, which is a way to support content creators such as ourselves. You can do a 99-cent membership for Korman Productions, which is a new way to support content creators. And of course, you can like, share, and comment on this video as well as subscribing to our channel. This is Dave and Stacie from Korman Productions, signing off.